Sir, I need you to step away from that seat. Now.
Enough. You are relieved of
Those
duty.
words,
Ground this plane
sharp,
immediately.
cold,
You're
dismissive,
fired.
cut through the airplane cabin like a knife. Marcus Williams looked up from his leather briefcase, his heart already knowing what his mind refused to accept. Not again. Not here. Not today. But the flight attendant's eyes told him everything she'd already decided: he didn't belong in first class. What she didn't know was that in 15 minutes, this black man would own more than just seat 2A, he'd own the entire airline. Before we dive into this story that shook America, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Stay with me until the very end, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. And comment below with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. I'm going to count to 3. Marcus Williams heard the threat before he even settled into seat 2A. He'd barely placed his worn leather briefcase in the overhead compartment, the same briefcase he'd carried for 15 years through every board meeting, every negotiation, every moment that built the life people now assumed he couldn't afford, when the voice came from behind him. Cold, sharp, already decided. He turned slowly, his movements deliberate. 47 years had taught him this dance. Move too fast, you're aggressive. Move too slow, you're non-compliant. Exist in a body like his and you're always performing a calculation that white passengers never have to consider. A flight attendant stood in the aisle, arms crossed tight across her chest. Her name tag read Jessica Martinez in crisp letters. Her eyes swept over him: navy blazer, simple white shirt, polished but aging shoes. And Marcus watched her face harden with each passing second. He'd seen that look before. That particular tightening around the mouth. That narrowing of eyes. The look that said, "You don't belong here." "Excuse me." Marcus kept his voice level, though his pulse had already started that familiar, unwelcome climb. That feeling of being a teenager again, followed through department stores by security guards who assumed his presence meant theft. "This is first class, sir." Jessica's tone made "sir" sound like an accusation, like he'd stolen the word from someone more deserving. "I need to see your boarding pass, now." Around them, the cabin had gone quiet in that particular way that makes your skin prickle. Marcus felt the eyes, always the eyes, turning toward him like flowers to sun. An elderly white couple in seats 1A and 1B, their conversation dying mid-sentence. A businessman across the aisle, his laptop forgotten. 2 women behind him, their whispers cutting through the silence like scissors through paper. Of course. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket, his movements careful, controlled. Non-threatening. He pulled out his phone, opened the airline app with fingers that wanted to shake but wouldn't. Couldn't. Not here. Not now. Jessica snatched the phone from his hand before he could turn the screen toward her. "Hey," Marcus started, but she'd already turned away, studying the screen with narrowed eyes. "This could be photoshopped," she announced loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "Anyone can fake a mobile boarding pass these days. I see it all the time." "I didn't fake anything." Marcus fought to keep his voice steady, even as something hot and familiar burned in his chest. "That's a legitimate ticket. Seat 2A, flight 2847 to Dallas. Purchased 3 weeks ago." "Uh-huh." Jessica's eyes flicked up to his face, then back to the phone, like she couldn't quite force herself to maintain eye contact. "And how exactly did you afford a first-class ticket?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Ripples of discomfort spread through the cabin. The businessman in 2C shifted in his seat. One of the women behind Marcus gasped softly, but nobody said a word in his defense. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, felt the old familiar weight settling over his shoulders. The weight his father had carried, his grandfather. The weight that came with skin that made people ask questions they'd never ask anyone else. "I purchased it," Marcus said quietly, each word deliberate and clear. "With money, like everyone else here." "Sir, don't get smart with me." Jessica took a step closer, and Marcus caught the slight tremor in her hands, despite her aggressive posture. She was scared, he realized. actually scared of him. A man sitting quietly in an airplane seat. I need to see a credit card, proof of purchase, government-issued ID. You need to see... Marcus stopped, breathed through his nose, counted to 3. His wife Angela always told him, count to 3 before you speak when you're angry, even when you have every right to be, especially then. Ma'am, I've shown you my boarding pass. I'm in my assigned seat. What's the actual problem here? The problem, Jessica said, her voice rising just enough for the whole cabin to hear clearly now, is that we've had multiple issues with people sneaking into first class this month, using other people's tickets, stolen credit cards, and you're acting very suspicious right now. Suspicious. Marcus repeated the word slowly, tasting its edges. I'm acting suspicious by sitting in my seat. You're acting defensive, and evasive, and frankly aggressive. Jessica pulled out her radio. I'm going to need to call the captain. Captain Morrison needs to see this. A young woman in seat 3C, early 30s, with determined eyes, had her phone out now, camera pointed directly at them. For the record, she said clearly, she never asked anyone else for additional ID, just so we're all clear about what's happening here. Jessica whirled on her. Ma'am, put that phone away right now. Recording is not permitted during boarding. It's a security risk. Actually, the young woman said, her voice steady and strong. I'm pretty sure it is permitted, and I'm pretty sure people need to see this. My name's Sarah Chen, by the way. Journalism professor at UT Austin. I know my rights. I don't care what you teach, Jessica snapped. This is my cabin, and I make the rules about recording. No, Sarah said simply. You don't. And we both know exactly what you're doing to this man. Marcus glanced at her, this stranger, this Sarah, and felt something crack in the ice around his heart. Just a little. Just enough to let in a sliver of warmth. Someone saw. Someone understood. Jessica. Marcus read her name tag again, committing it to memory, the way he'd learned to memorize the names of everyone who'd ever wronged him. Documentation. Evidence. Protection. Before you call the captain, why don't you scan my boarding pass at the gate reader? It'll verify everything electronically. Take 30 seconds. I don't need to verify anything electronically. I know when something's wrong. She pressed the radio button, her thumb white with pressure. Captain Morrison, I need you at 2A immediately. We have a situation that requires your attention. A situation. Marcus closed his eyes for just a moment, just one moment, to steady himself. He'd become a situation simply by existing in a space someone decided he shouldn't occupy. Like the country club his family finally had enough money to join when he was 12, where the membership committee suddenly lost their application. Like the college dorm, where his roommate's mother demanded a room change the day she met him. Like the first board meeting, where the CEO assumed he was there to fix the projector. This is ridiculous, he said, more to himself than to her, but loud enough to carry. What did you say to me? Jessica's voice went sharp, brittle. I said this is ridiculous. You're harassing me because I'm doing my job. Jessica cut him off, but Marcus saw it now, the slight flush creeping up her neck, the way her eyes wouldn't quite meet his. Guilt and fear, and something else. Something that looked almost like shame, wrestling with self-justification. And if you don't cooperate fully, I'll have security remove you from this aircraft. Behind Marcus, a man's voice spoke up, the businessman in 2C, trying for reasonableness and landing somewhere near condescension. Maybe you should just show her what she wants, buddy. Make it easier on everyone. We all want to take off on time, right? Marcus turned slowly. The businessman was mid-40s, expensive suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month, wedding ring glinting under the cabin lights. His face wore that particular expression Marcus had seen 1,000 times, discomfort masquerading as helpfulness. The kind of moderate who'd rather have peace than justice. I've shown her my boarding pass, Marcus said evenly. Yeah, but just, you know. The man shrugged, spreading his hands in a gesture that was meant to seem universal, but just looked weak. Give her the credit card or whatever, so we can all get moving. It's not a big deal. Why should I have to prove anything more than anyone else here? Marcus kept his voice level, but something in his chest was burning now. Growing. Did she ask you for your credit card when you boarded? The businessman's face flushed. That's not... I mean, this is different. How? Marcus pressed. How is it different? Explain it to me. Use your words. I just meant, look, I don't want to get involved in... You're already involved, Sarah interjected from 3C, her phone still recording. You involved yourself the second you told him to comply with a double standard. That makes you part of this. The businessman opened his mouth, closed it, then turned back to his laptop with the speed of someone desperate to become invisible. The elderly woman in 1B leaned toward her husband, stage whispering in that way older white women sometimes do, loud enough to be heard, but soft enough to pretend it's private. I knew something was off when I saw him sit down. You can just tell, can't you? There's something about the way they carry themselves. My late sister worked for the TSA, and she always said, trust your instincts about these things. Her husband made a shushing sound, patting her hand. But his eyes, when they met Marcus's, were full of the same assumption. The same prejudgment. You can just tell. Marcus felt it like a physical blow, not unexpected, but still painful. Still capable of drawing blood. He thought about his daughter Maya starting college next month. Thought about the talk he'd had to have with her about what to do if a flight attendant, a store clerk, a police officer made assumptions. How to be small. How to be safe. How to survive being black in spaces that didn't think you belonged. And he thought about his son Jordan, who'd asked him just last week, Dad, why do you always fly first class now that you can afford it? Why does it matter? Because it does. Marcus had told him, because every time I sit in that seat, I'm proving that we belong everywhere, even when, especially when people don't think we do. Ma'am, Jessica addressed the elderly woman now, and Marcus heard the gratitude in her voice, the relief at having someone validate her suspicions. Thank you for your patience during this. We'll have it handled very soon. Thank her. Marcus turned to look at her fully now. She just said, Did you hear what she just said about me? About people like me? I heard a concerned passenger expressing valid safety concerns. Jessica replied smoothly, like she'd been trained in exactly this kind of deflection. Which is exactly what I'm doing. My job is to ensure everyone's safety and comfort on this flight. Everyone's comfort, Marcus repeated slowly, tasting the bitterness of the words. Including mine. Or does that not count in your calculation? Before Jessica could answer, heavy footsteps echoed down the aisle. Captain Derek Morrison appeared mid-50s, silver hair that probably inspired confidence in most passengers, the kind of weathered face that spoke of experience and authority. But Marcus saw his eyes sweep the scene and land on him with instant judgment. Saw the slight tightening of his jaw. Saw him make the same calculation everyone else had made. Guilty until proven innocent. Suspicious by default. What's the situation here? Morrison's voice carried the weight of command and the edge of annoyance. A man used to being obeyed, inconvenienced by having to handle something his crew should have managed. Captain, this passenger is refusing to verify his ticket properly, Jessica said quickly, her words tumbling over each other in her rush to justify herself. He showed me a mobile boarding pass, but he won't provide additional identification. He's being confrontational defensive and won't follow proper security procedures. That's not true, Marcus said, keeping his voice calm even as his heart hammered. I showed her my valid boarding pass. She's demanding additional identification that she hasn't requested from a single other passenger in this cabin. Not one. Morrison looked at Marcus for a long moment. Marcus could see him processing the suit, the briefcase, the calm demeanor, and still coming up with the wrong answer. Still seeing threat instead of customer, problem instead of person. Sir, Morrison said, his tone suggesting this was already decided. If my flight attendant has concerns about your ticket's validity, you're required to provide additional verification. It's standard procedure. Standard procedure, Marcus echoed. For everyone? or just for me? For anyone whose ticket raises questions. What question did my ticket raise? Marcus leaned forward slightly. What about my valid, electronically verified boarding pass suggested fraud? Be specific. Morrison's jaw tightened. Jessica has extensive experience identifying suspicious behavior. What behavior? Marcus interrupted. Walking to my seat, putting my bag in the overhead, existing while black in first class. Which one of those behaviors triggered this response? Sir, I'm not going to engage with accusations of... I'm not accusing, Marcus said quietly. I'm asking you to explain. If this is truly standard procedure, explain what standard I failed to meet. Show me the policy. Give me the specific regulation that requires me, and only me, to provide a credit card and driver's license to sit in a seat I paid for. The cabin had gone absolutely silent now. Even the businessmen pretending not to listen had stopped typing. Everyone was watching this unfold with the horrified fascination of people witnessing something they know is wrong but don't know how to stop. Morrison's face hardened into that particular expression of authority challenged. Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time, and this is your final opportunity. Show me your government-issued identification and proof of purchase, or I will have airport security escort you off this aircraft. Those are your only two options. Marcus felt time slow down, felt the moment crystallize into something sharp and clear. This was the choice then, the same choice his father had faced, his grandfather. Every black person who'd ever been told they didn't belong somewhere and had to decide comply with injustice or stand firm and face the consequences. And if I have a valid explanation for being in this seat, Marcus asked softly, if I can prove beyond any doubt that I belong here, then show me right now, Morrison challenged, crossing his arms. After you've humiliated me in front of everyone, Marcus shook his head slowly. After you've made me a spectacle, after you've assumed I'm a criminal. No, that's not how this works. You don't get to degrade me first and verify later. I'm not degrading you. You're making this difficult yourself. The words hit like a slap, like every time someone had told him he was the problem for refusing to accept disrespect quietly. Marcus felt the eyes of every passenger burning into him, some sympathetic, most uncomfortable, a few outright hostile, and he knew with absolute certainty that no matter what happened next, this moment would define him for everyone on this plane. The difficult passenger, the angry one, the one who wouldn't just comply. Sarah's voice cut through from 3C. You know what's difficult? Watching a man be harassed for the color of his skin, and having to explain to my students later why nobody stood up for him. Morrison turned to her. Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. It concerns all of us, Sarah shot back. Because if you can do this to him, you can do it to anyone. That's how injustice works. It starts with one person everyone agrees is acceptable to target, and it spreads. I'm calling security. Morrison pulled out his radio. This is Captain Morrison. I need airport security at Gate 15A immediately. We have 2 passengers refusing to comply with crew instructions and disrupting the boarding process. 2 passengers? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm complying fine. I'm sitting quietly in my seat documenting a civil rights violation. There's a difference. Morrison ignored her, speaking into his radio. Also alert the gate supervisor. We may need to deplane and rebook. Marcus sat perfectly still, his hands folded in his lap. He thought about Angela, who'd kissed him goodbye this morning, and said, "Be safe." Like she always did. Like she had to. He thought about Maya and Jordan, who'd grow up in a world where this still happened. Where their father, chairman of a major airline, could still be treated like a criminal for sitting in a seat he owned. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Not the one Jessica had confiscated, his other one. The private line. The one only 5 people in the world had the number for. He didn't need to check it to know what it said. They were watching. They'd been watching since the first live stream went up 30 seconds after this started. "Security's on the way," Morrison announced to the cabin. his voice carrying false authority and real nervousness. "I apologize for the delay, folks. We'll have this resolved very shortly and get you on your way." Resolved. Like Marcus was a problem to be solved, an equation to be balanced, a disruption to be removed. The security officers arrived faster than expected, two of them both looking tired and annoyed at being called for what was clearly a boarding dispute that shouldn't require law enforcement. The first officer, older and weathered, had his hand already drifting toward his belt in a gesture Marcus knew too well. The second, younger, with kind eyes, looked uncomfortable the moment he saw the scene. "What's the problem here?" The first officer asked, his voice carrying that particular cop weariness that came from years of being called to resolve white people's discomfort with black existence. Morrison stepped forward, establishing authority. "This passenger is refusing to comply with crew instructions. He won't verify his ticket or provide proper identification despite multiple requests." "I showed my valid boarding pass," Marcus said calmly, looking directly at the officers. "They're demanding additional proof that they haven't required from anyone else on this aircraft. Not a single other person." The younger officer looked around the cabin, taking in the sea of white faces, the expensive carry-ons, the comfortable assumption of belonging. Then back at Marcus, the only black passenger in first class. Marcus watched realization dawn in the young man's eyes. "Did they ask anyone else for ID?" Marcus pressed gently. "Before you put your hands on me, before you remove me from this plane, I need you to ask yourself that question. Ask everyone in this cabin. Did the crew demand credit cards and driver's licenses from everyone, or just from me?" The younger officer opened his mouth, but his partner cut him off. "Sir, if the crew has safety concerns—" "I'm not a safety concern," Marcus said. His voice still calm, but carrying an edge now sharp as broken glass. "I'm a paying customer sitting in my assigned seat. The only thing I'm threatening is someone's assumption about who belongs in first class." Sarah spoke up, her phone still recording. "I've been documenting this entire interaction. She never asked anyone else. Not one person. I have video evidence of selective enforcement." "Ma'am, you need to put that phone," the first officer started. "It's legal to record in public spaces," Sarah interrupted. "And considering what's happening here, I think the public has a right to see it. My live stream already has 50,000 viewers and climbing." Marcus saw Morrison's face pale slightly at that number. 50,000. Witnesses. Evidence. Consequences. His private phone buzzed again, insistent this time. Urgent. He pulled it out slowly, deliberately, keeping his hands visible. "Read the message. Stand down. 15 minutes. Let them see." He looked back up at the officers, at Morrison, at Jessica, who was starting to look genuinely scared now. At all the passengers watching this spectacle with varying degrees of discomfort and complicity. 15 minutes, Marcus said aloud. Morrison frowned, confused. "What? Give me 15 minutes. Marcus repeated, his voice steady and clear. "Don't remove me. Don't escalate this. Just 15 minutes. If I can't resolve this to everyone's satisfaction in that time, I'll leave voluntarily. No scene. No resistance. You have my word." The officers looked at each other, then at Morrison. The captain's face cycled through confusion, suspicion, and calculation. "Why should we wait?" Morrison asked. "What happens in 15 minutes? Information," Marcus said simply. "Information that will make this situation very, very clear to everyone involved, one way or another." "That sounds like a threat," Jessica said, her voice shaking now. "It's not a threat." Marcus met her eyes, held them. "It's a promise. 15 minutes. That's all I'm asking. And then everyone here, everyone watching, will understand exactly what happened today." Morrison studied him for a long moment. Marcus could see the gears turning, the risk assessment, the crowd control calculation, the potential PR nightmare of forcibly removing a calm, compliant passenger, while cameras rolled and 50,000 people watched live. "Fine," Morrison said finally, his voice tight. 15 minutes, but security stays. And if you're not off this plane by then. If I'm not vindicated by then, Marcus corrected gently, I'll walk off myself. You have my word, as a man who's never broken a promise in his life. The captain nodded curtly and gestured for the security officers to step back, but stay close. Jessica retreated to the galley, her hands shaking visibly now. Marcus settled back into seat 2A and pulled out his watch, his father's watch, the one he'd worn the day he became the first in their family to graduate college. 15 minutes. The cabin settled into an uncomfortable silence, the kind that happens when everyone knows something is about to break, but no one knows what. Marcus felt his heart pounding, but his hands were steady. He'd been preparing for this moment his entire life, even if he hadn't known it. He thought about his grandmother, who'd cleaned white people's houses in Montgomery, and told him, "Baby, you belong anywhere your feet can take you. Don't let nobody tell you different." He thought about the first time he'd flown first class 23 years ago, when he'd saved for months to surprise Angela with an anniversary trip. The flight attendant had asked him politely, but pointedly, if he was sure he was in the right seat. This had been happening his whole life. The difference was, today, he had the power to make sure it never happened again. 14 minutes. Morrison had pulled out his phone, was typing furiously. His face had gone from irritated to concerned. Marcus watched the transition with grim satisfaction. Sarah leaned forward from 3C. "Whatever you're planning," she whispered, 68,000 people are watching now, and they're on your side. Marcus gave her a small nod of thanks. "What made you start recording?" "My father," she said quietly. "He was Filipino. Died 2 years ago. But I remember watching him get treated like this his whole life, in airports and stores and restaurants, always having to prove he belonged. I swore I'd never look away again." "Thank you," Marcus said, and meant it. 13 minutes. Jessica emerged from the galley, her own phone pressed to her ear. Marcus couldn't hear the conversation, but he watched her face cycle through confusion, then denial, then something that looked like dawning horror. "Captain," she called out, her voice breaking slightly. "Captain, I just got a call from regional management. They want to—" "I know," Morrison cut her off. His voice hollow. "I'm dealing with it." "Dealing with what?" the businessman in 2C asked nervously. Morrison ignored him, pressing his phone harder against his ear. "Sir, if you'll just let me explain the situation. No, I understand that. But sir, please, you don't understand what happened here. He was—" Marcus watched the captain's face drain of color. Watched him glance at Marcus with something that looked like recognition and rising panic. 12 minutes. "What's going on?" the elderly woman from 1B demanded. "Why won't anyone explain what's happening?" "What's happening?" Sarah said clearly, her phone still recording, still broadcasting to what was now over 100,000 viewers. "Is that assumptions are about to meet consequences. And it's about 30 years overdue." 11 minutes. Morrison ended his call and stood frozen in the aisle for a moment, his phone hanging limply in his hand. Then he turned and his eyes found Marcus, with an expression that mixed horror, disbelief, and something that might have been desperate hope that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. "Mr. Williams," Morrison began, and the use of Marcus's name, a name he'd never given, sent a visible shockwave through the cabin. Passengers started murmuring. The businessman in 2C made a sound like someone had punched him in the stomach. "How do you know my name?" Marcus asked quietly, though he knew the answer. "I just received a call." Morrison said, his voice barely above a whisper, from the CEO of Southwest Airlines. The cabin erupted. 10 minutes. Jessica had gone white as paper. "The CEO. What did we— Oh God, what did we do?" Morrison held up a shaking hand for silence, but it took nearly a minute for the passenger conversations to die down. Marcus sat perfectly still, watching it all unfold with the calm of someone who'd known exactly how this would play. "There's been a misunderstanding," Morrison announced to the cabin, his voice cracking on the last word. "A serious misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding?" the businessman asked, his voice climbing toward panic. Marcus said nothing, just waited. Let them piece it together themselves. Let them feel that moment of realization, sharp and cutting. 9 minutes. Sarah's phone chimed. She looked at it, then at Marcus, her eyes wide. "The news," she breathed. "It's on every major outlet. CNN, Fox, MSNBC. Southwest Airlines chairman racially profiled on own airline. Oh my God." Jessica let out a sound, half sob, half gasp. "Chairman," she whispered. You're, oh God, I didn't know. We didn't know." "Know what?" Marcus interrupted gently. "That I was someone important. Someone powerful." He shook his head slowly. "That's the problem, Jessica. You shouldn't have needed to know. You should have treated me with respect regardless of who I am. Because that's what decent human beings do." 8 minutes. Morrison's phone rang again. He answered it, listened for 5 seconds, then wordlessly held it out to Marcus. The cabin watched in absolute silence as Marcus took the phone. "Williams here." "Marcus." Margaret Chen's voice. Southwest's CEO and one of the few people who knew exactly where Marcus was today, carried relief and fury in equal measure. "Tell me you're okay." "I'm fine, Margaret. The board is watching this live. The shareholders are watching. Half the country is watching." She paused. "What do you need?" Marcus looked around the cabin at the passengers who couldn't meet his eyes, now at Jessica, who was crying quietly at Morrison, who looked like he might be sick at Sarah, still recording with determined eyes. "I need," Marcus said slowly, carefully, "for everyone here to understand what just happened. To really understand it. To feel it. So it never happens again." "They will," Margaret promised. "I'm sending VP Harris to meet the flight. Legal team's en route. Communications is already drafting a statement. And Marcus?" "Yes." "I'm sorry this happened to you." Her voice broke slightly. "Again." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "Again. Because this wasn't the first time. Wouldn't be the last. But maybe, just maybe, it could be the catalyst for something bigger." "Make sure they understand," Marcus said quietly, "that this isn't about me being important. It's about every person who gets treated like this and doesn't have the power to fight back. Consider it done." He handed the phone back to Morrison. The captain took it with shaking hands. 7 minutes. The businessman in 2C had pulled up news articles on his laptop. Marcus could see the headlines reflecting in the man's glasses. "Caught on camera racial profiling at 30,000 feet. Southwest chairman removed from first class. Viral video shows airline bias." "I didn't know," the businessman said to no one in particular. "I told him to just comply. I told him, oh God, I'm on camera telling him that. I'm going to be, everyone's going to see." "They already do," Sarah said flatly. 200,000 viewers now, and counting. Marcus watched it all with a strange sense of calm. This was the moment. The inflection point. When people who'd been complicit in small ways realized they'd participated in something bigger. Something systemic. Something that lived in assumptions and silence and the safety of crowds. 6 minutes. Morrison sank into a jump seat, his head in his hands. 23 years, he said to himself. 23 years flying, and I ended my career in 15 minutes. "You ended it the moment you assumed I didn't belong," Marcus corrected gently. "The rest was just consequences catching up." 5 minutes. Jessica approached slowly, her face blotchy with tears. "Mr. Williams, I need to..." I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was just trying to... To do what? Marcus asked. Not unkindly, not cruelly, but needing her to say it, to name it. I don't know, she whispered. I saw you and I thought... You thought what? That something was wrong. The admission came out broken ashamed. That you didn't fit. And oh God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Tell me why, Marcus said quietly. Not the apology, the why. What about me suggested wrong? Jessica shook her head, crying harder now. Say it. Marcus pressed, still gentle but firm. Because if you can't name it, you can't fix it. And if you can't fix it, this happens to someone else tomorrow. You were black, she whispered finally. You were black in first class and my brain it didn't fit what I expected. And I made assumptions. Horrible assumptions. And I'm so sorry. 4 minutes. Marcus nodded slowly. Thank you, he said, for being honest. That's the first step. The hard part is everything that comes after. Sarah spoke up from behind. 300,000 viewers now. And Mr. Williams. They want to know what happens next. They want justice. Justice, Marcus repeated, tasting the word. What does that look like here? Morrison lifted his head. I'll resign, he said flatly. Immediately, before we even take off. No, Marcus interrupted. Everyone stared at him. No. Morrison repeated, confused. Resignations are easy, Marcus said. They let you fade away quietly, learn nothing, change nothing. What I want is harder. 3 minutes. I want you both, Jessica, Captain Morrison, to become case studies. Living examples. You're going to work with our new bias training program. You're going to tell your story, all of it, including how it felt to realize you were wrong, to every employee, at every airline that will listen. You're going to make sure this moment of shame becomes a catalyst for real change. Jessica's eyes widened. You're not firing us. I'm giving you a choice, Marcus corrected. Resign and disappear, or stay and do the hard work of becoming better, of helping others become better. Your careers as you knew them are over either way. But you get to decide what comes next. 2 minutes. Morrison looked at Jessica. Jessica looked at Marcus. The cabin held its breath. I'll do it, Jessica said finally. Whatever it takes. I'll do it. Morrison nodded slowly. Me too. Yes, whatever you need. 1 minute. Marcus's watch beeped softly. 15 minutes. Time. He stood and the entire cabin seemed to lean forward, waiting, watching. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus said, his voice carrying to every seat. My name is Marcus Williams. I'm the chairman of Southwest Airlines. And what you witnessed today, what 400,000 people have now watched online, is exactly why I chose to fly today, instead of taking a private car to our board meeting. Gasps rippled through the cabin. This wasn't an accident, Marcus continued. I fly commercial regularly. Sometimes in first class, sometimes in coach. Because I need to see what our customers see. Experience what they experience. And today, you all witnessed something that happens more often than anyone wants to admit. He looked at each passenger one by one. Some of you remained silent. Some of you participated. One of you, he nodded at Sarah, had the courage to document it. And now, we all get to decide what happens next. Do we pretend this was an isolated incident? Or do we acknowledge that this is how it is, has always been, and will continue to be, unless we all choose differently? 0 minutes. The cabin was absolutely silent. This flight will continue to Dallas, Marcus said. Captain Morrison and Ms. Martinez will remain as crew, but when we land, things change. For this airline, for this industry, for everyone who thinks they can determine who belongs where, based on the color of their skin. He sat back down in seat 2A, his seat, the one he'd paid for, the one he'd always had the right to occupy. "Now," he said quietly, "let's fly." The cabin stayed frozen for 3 heartbeats after Marcus sat down. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The air itself seemed to have thickened with the weight of what had just been revealed. Then the elderly woman in 1B started crying. Not quiet tears, full gasping sobs that shook her thin shoulders. Her husband put his arm around her, but she shook him off. "I said those things," she choked out. "I said, oh God, I said you could just tell. Everyone heard me. Everyone saw me." Marcus turned in his seat to look at her. She was 70, maybe older, with carefully styled white hair and pearls that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her face was crumpling like paper. "What's your name?" Marcus asked gently. "Patricia," she whispered. "Patricia Donovan. From Scottsdale." "Patricia, look at me." Marcus waited until her watery eyes met his. "What you said hurt. It hurt because I've heard versions of it my entire life. But you know what hurts more? The people who think it and never say it out loud. At least you were honest." "That doesn't make it better," Patricia said, her voice breaking. "That makes it worse. I thought I was better than this. I marched in the 60s. I voted for Obama, twice. And then I saw you and you defaulted to what your brain has been trained to see." Marcus finished for her. "That's what bias is. It's not always hate. Sometimes it's just the stories we've been told so many times we forget they're stories." Patricia's husband, a tall man with kind eyes that were now full of shame, spoke up. "I should have said something, when she whispered that I should have told her she was wrong. But I just wanted to avoid a scene." "And that's how it continues," Sarah interjected from 3C, her phone still recording. "Good people staying quiet because confrontation is uncomfortable. Sir, what's your name?" "Richard Donovan." "Richard, you're now part of 430,000 people's education on complicity. How does that feel?" Richard flinched like she'd slapped him. "Terrible. It feels terrible." The businessman in 2C, who'd been sitting rigid with his laptop screen glowing with news articles about himself, finally spoke. "I'm going to lose my job." His voice was hollow. "I'm a diversity consultant. I train companies on inclusive practices. And I just told a black man, being racially profiled, to comply with it. On camera, while 400,000 people watched. 470,000 now," Sarah corrected, glancing at her phone. "And yes, you probably will lose your job. Or at least your credibility. But Mr. Williams is right. You get to decide what comes after. You can hide, or you can own it and do better." The businessman Marcus could see his nameplate now reflected in his laptop screen. David Chen Inclusive Solutions laughed bitterly. "Do better. I spent 10 years building a reputation, and I destroyed it in 30 seconds by telling you to just show her your credit card. Like it was no big deal. Like systematic oppression is just an inconvenience everyone should work around quietly." "It is for people like you," Marcus said, not unkindly. "People who can choose when to care about injustice. Who can turn it off when it gets uncomfortable." David's face crumpled. "My father would be so ashamed. He came here from Taiwan with nothing. Worked 3 jobs. Dealt with discrimination his whole life. And I perpetuated the same thing that hurt him. To another person of color." "Then don't waste this," Marcus said. "Use it. Let it break you open so something better can grow." Morrison had been standing near the cockpit, his phone pressed to his ear, having what looked like an intensely painful conversation. He ended the call and walked back down the aisle, each step looking like it cost him something. "Mr. Williams," he said, his voice scraped raw, I have to say." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I've been flying for 23 years. Military before that. I thought I was fair. I thought I treated everyone the same. But I just spent 15 minutes on the phone with my wife, and she reminded me about the time I complained that our daughter's college roommate, a black girl from Detroit, probably only got in because of affirmative action. I said that. I believed that. And my wife told me to shut up, and she hasn't spoken to me since. He looked around the cabin. I need everyone here to understand something. I wasn't trying to be racist. I didn't wake up this morning thinking I'd profile someone. But I did. I saw Mr. Williams and made a split-second judgment based on nothing but the color of his skin. And I backed my flight attendant when she did the same thing because it was easier than questioning my own assumptions. Jessica had been standing in the galley, her face buried in her hands. Now she stepped forward, her eyes red and swollen. I need to tell you all something, she said, her voice shaking. 2 months ago, a white passenger in coach tried to move to an empty first-class seat without permission. I caught him, and you know what I did? I laughed. I joked with him. I said, "Nice try," and walked him back to his seat. No ID check, no credit card demand, no security, just a friendly correction. She looked directly at Marcus. But when I saw you, I saw a threat. I saw fraud. I saw someone who didn't belong. And the worst part, I justified it. I told myself I was just being thorough, doing my job, following my instincts. But my instincts were wrong, because they were built on bias I didn't even know I had. You knew, said a voice from the back of the cabin. A black woman in 8A economy class, Marcus noted, because she'd walked up to witness the aftermath, stood in the aisle. You knew exactly what you were doing. We always know. We just pretend we don't, because it's easier. Jessica turned to face her. Who are you? My name is Denise Parker. I'm a doctor, trauma surgeon at Dallas General. And I came up here because I heard what was happening and I wanted to see if I could help. She looked at Marcus. I've been flying for 15 years, Mr. Williams. I've been stopped, questioned, and searched more times than I can count. I've watched white passengers skip through security while I get the full treatment. I've been asked if I'm in the right seat so many times I started booking coach just to avoid the confrontation. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. You shouldn't have to do that. I know, Denise said simply. But we do what we have to do to survive with dignity intact. The question is, what are you going to do now that you've exposed this? Because viral videos are great, but they fade. Outrage is great, but it's exhausting. Real change requires sustained commitment. I know, Marcus said. That's why this isn't ending when we land. This is just beginning. Sarah's phone rang. She looked at the caller ID and her eyes widened. It's CNN. They want to interview me when we land, and they want to interview passengers who witnessed this. She looked around the cabin. Anyone want to explain to Anderson Cooper why they stayed silent? The cabin erupted in nervous conversation. Passengers who'd been pretending to read suddenly couldn't pretend anymore. The woman in 4B started crying. The man in 3D was on his phone, presumably calling a lawyer. The couple in 2D were having a whispered argument that was getting louder by the second. You told me not to get involved, the wife hissed. Because I didn't want us on the news, the husband shot back. Well, congratulations, we're on the news anyway. And now we look like cowards. Marcus's private phone buzzed again. He looked at the message. Legal wants to know your plan. PR wants a statement. Board wants a call. And the NAACP just issued a press release supporting you. This is national now. He typed back, good. Let it be national. Let everyone see. Morrison approached again, this time with a tablet. Mr. Williams, I need to show you something. He pulled up Twitter, and Marcus saw the hashtag trending #JusticeFor2A. Millions of tweets. Video clips from Sarah's live stream edited and shared thousands of times. News anchors discussing it live. Think pieces being written in real time. But also, and this was what made Marcus's stomach turn, death threats. Racist comments flooding in saying he was playing the race card, making it up, being divisive. Photographs of Jessica and Morrison with their home addresses. Calls for them to be fired, arrested worse. It's getting ugly, Morrison said quietly. My wife is scared. Jessica's parents are getting threatening calls. And I deserve consequences, but they don't. Marcus looked at the tablet at the vitriol pouring in from people who'd decided this was about political correctness instead of basic human dignity. This is what happens, Marcus said, when you challenge the comfortable narrative. People get angry because you're asking them to see something they've been avoiding. But Jessica Derrick. He used their first names deliberately. You need to understand something. The people sending death threats aren't mad at you for profiling me. They're mad at me for calling it out. That's not your fault. But we started this, Jessica said, her voice small. No, Denise interjected from where she was still standing. This started 400 years ago. You just participated in the latest iteration. The question is whether you're brave enough to help end it. A flight attendant from economy class appeared looking nervous. Captain Morrison, we need to make a decision. Do we fly? Because if we delay much longer, we'll miss our departure window. Morrison looked at Marcus. Mr. Williams, I'm not sure I should be flying this plane. Not after... You're flying, Marcus said firmly. Because if you don't, the narrative becomes that you were forced out by political correctness. And that's not what happened here. What happened is you made a mistake, acknowledged it, and now you're going to do your job while committing to do better. That's the story. But the passengers... Morrison gestured around the cabin, where people were still in various stages of shock and shame. Half of them probably don't want me in control of this aircraft. Then let's ask them, Marcus said. He stood, and the cabin quieted immediately. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to address something. Captain Morrison has offered to step down from flying this aircraft. He believes his actions today have compromised your trust. So, I'm going to ask you directly, do you feel safe with him flying? Silence. Then Patricia Donovan raised her hand. I do, she said, her voice stronger now. Because he's been honest about his mistakes. And because Mr. Williams trusts him, and Mr. Williams has every reason not to. Richard Donovan raised his hand next. I agree. I think we all need to see what accountability looks like. And it doesn't look like running away. One by one, hands went up around the cabin. Not all of them. The couple in 2D kept their hands down, their faces tight with resentment. An older man in 5A shook his head and pulled out his phone to make what looked like an angry call. But most passengers raised their hands, some reluctantly, some eagerly. All of them aware that their choices were being recorded and would be discussed and dissected for weeks to come. There's your answer, Marcus said to Morrison. Now let's fly to Dallas and let's do it right. Morrison nodded, his face working through emotions. Marcus recognized shame and gratitude and determination all mixed together. Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'll do better, I promise. Don't promise me, Marcus said. Promise yourself, and then keep the promise. As Morrison headed back to the cockpit, Jessica approached Marcus one more time. Mr. Williams, I need to know, why didn't you tell me who you were at the beginning? Why did you let it go so far? Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Because if I'd told you immediately, you would have apologized and backed down, and you would have told yourself it was all a misunderstanding. You would have said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know you were important." But that's exactly the problem, Jessica. I shouldn't have had to be important. I should have been treated with respect because I'm a human being with a valid ticket sitting in an assigned seat. The chairman part is irrelevant. But people are going to think I was trying to discriminate against someone powerful. Jessica said, her voice rising in panic. They're going to think I'm stupid for not recognizing you. Let them think that, Marcus said. Let them miss the point entirely if they want to. The people who matter will understand. The people who've lived this will understand. And the people who haven't, but are willing to learn, they'll understand eventually. Sarah lowered her phone for the first time in 30 minutes. 600,000 viewers, she said. And Mr. Williams. The comments section is exactly what you'd expect. Half the people are celebrating you. Half are saying you orchestrated this for attention. A few are threatening violence. And everyone Everyone has an opinion about what this means. What do you think it means? Marcus asked her. Sarah considered for a moment. I think it means we're all complicit in systems we don't even see. I think it means good intentions don't matter if they lead to bad outcomes. And I think it means you just kicked a hornet's nest of American racism that's going to sting a lot of people before this is over. Good, Marcus said simply. David Chen, the diversity consultant, had been typing furiously on his laptop. Now he turned the screen toward Marcus. I just posted a public statement, acknowledging what I said, apologizing, and committing to donate my speaking fees for the next year to racial justice organizations. It's not enough, but it's a start. It's more than most people do, Marcus acknowledged. What made you decide to post it so quickly? Because, David said, his voice thick with emotion, I realized I had a choice. I could spend the next few weeks trying to hide from this, or I could own it immediately and use whatever platform I have left to do something useful. My father used to say that shame is only destructive if you let it sit. If you transform it into action, it becomes growth. Your father sounds wise. He was, David said. He died last year, and I just realized if he could see me right now, see what I did, he'd be devastated. But he'd also tell me to fix it. So that's what I'm trying to do. Patricia Donovan had been on her phone as well, typing slowly with shaking hands. She held it up to show Marcus. I just emailed my book club, 23 women who've been meeting for 15 years. I told them what I did today and what I learned. I asked them to read something about implicit bias before our next meeting. I know it's small, but it's not small, Marcus interrupted. That's how change happens. Not with grand gestures, but with small commitments made over and over again. The intercom crackled to life. Morrison's voice, still shaky but professional. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been cleared for pushback and takeoff. Flight time to Dallas will be approximately 2 hours and 45 minutes. The weather in Dallas is clear. And... He paused, and Marcus heard him take a deep breath. And I want to thank you all for your patience during this unprecedented situation. I also want to commit to each of you that I will spend the rest of my career making sure what happened today never happens again. To anyone. For any reason. The cabin was quiet as the engine started. Marcus felt the familiar vibration of an aircraft preparing for departure, but nothing about this felt familiar. Nothing felt normal. Denise Parker, still standing in the aisle, caught Marcus's eye. Mr. Williams, I need to get back to my seat before we take off. But I want you to know something. There are hundreds of us, thousands probably, who've experienced versions of this. Who've stayed quiet because fighting back meant missing our flights, losing our jobs, being labeled as difficult. Thank you for having the power to fight back and using it. You have power too, Marcus said. Your voice, your story. That's power. Maybe, Denise said. But it's easier to be brave when you're the chairman of the airline, and they can't actually remove you. She had a point. Marcus thought about all the times he hadn't been chairman, hadn't had power, had complied and swallowed his dignity, because the alternative was worse. He thought about the college student version of himself removed from a department store for suspicious behavior, when he'd just been shopping for his mother's birthday gift. The 25-year-old version, interviewing for jobs, watching interviewers' faces change when they realized the M. Williams on his resume was black. The 30-year-old version, driving his new car, pulled over 5 times in 3 months by police, who couldn't believe a black man could own a BMW. He'd survived all of that by making himself smaller, quieter, less threatening, by proving over and over that he belonged. And now, he had the power to make sure others didn't have to do the same. Denise, Marcus called out as she turned to leave. Give me your contact information. I want you to be part of what comes next. She paused, turned back. What comes next? Change, Marcus said simply. Real, systematic change. And I need people who've lived this, who can speak to it authentically, to help design what that looks like. Denise pulled out a business card, handed it to him. You know there are going to be people who say you're overreacting, that this was one incident, that you're being divisive. Let them say it, Marcus replied. I've been hearing that my whole life. The people in power always think the people demanding change are being divisive, because to them the status quo is comfortable. The plane started moving, backing away from the gate. Through the window, Marcus could see crowds gathering on the tarmac. News crews, he realized. Cameras, reporters. The story had grown beyond the cabin, beyond the live stream, into something that would be discussed in homes and offices and schools across the country. Sarah was still recording, narrating quietly into her phone. We're about to take off now. The cabin is quiet. People are processing what just happened. And I think we're all starting to realize that this flight is going to be remembered. Not for arriving on time or having good service, but for being the moment when America had to confront something it's been avoiding. Jessica walked down the aisle, preparing the cabin for takeoff, and Marcus watched passengers' faces as she approached them. Some smiled supportively. Some looked away embarrassed. Some stared at her with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. She was bearing the weight of becoming a symbol, the face of bias captured on video, dissected in real time. How are you holding up? Marcus asked as she passed his row. Jessica stopped, and he saw her struggling not to cry again. I don't know, she admitted. I keep thinking about every passenger I've ever questioned. Every time I made assumptions. Every time I thought I was just doing my job, but I was really profiling people. How many people did I hurt without even realizing it? That's the right question to ask, Marcus said. The wrong question would be, how do I make people forgive me? The right question is, how do I make sure I never do this again? I'm scared, Jessica whispered. The death threats are bad, but I'm more scared that I'm going to mess up again. That I'm going to try really hard and still fail because the bias runs so deep, I don't even see it. Then you surround yourself with people who can help you see it, Marcus said. You listen more than you speak. You stay uncomfortable. Because the moment you get comfortable again, the moment you think you've figured it out, that's when you slip back into old patterns. The plane reached the runway, engines building to a roar. Marcus gripped the armrests, not from fear of flying, but from the weight of everything that was about to happen. When this plane landed in Dallas, the real work would begin. Press conferences, meetings with lawyers and PR teams and board members, designing new training programs, rewriting policies, facing shareholders who'd be worried about stock prices and public perception. But also, and this was what kept Marcus grounded, meeting with people like Denise, listening to their stories, creating space for voices that had been silenced. Using this moment of visibility to force conversations that people had been avoiding for decades. The plane accelerated down the runway, and Marcus felt that familiar pull as the wheels left the ground. They were airborne, flying towards something uncertain and necessary and long overdue. Patricia Donovan turned around in her seat to look at Marcus. Mr. Williams, I just want to say I'm 72 years old. And I've spent most of my life thinking I was one of the good ones. But I'm realizing now that being good isn't about what you believe. It's about what you do when your beliefs are tested. And I failed that test today. You're still here, Marcus said. That's what matters. You didn't get off the plane. You didn't hide. You're sitting with the discomfort. That's more than most people do. My granddaughter is 10, Patricia continued. She's biracial. My son married a black woman, and I was so proud of myself for being accepting. Like I deserved a medal for basic human decency. But now I'm thinking about what I would tell Sophia if she heard me say what I said today. How I would explain to her that her grandmother, who claims to love her, made assumptions about a man based on the same color skin she has. Richard put his hand on his wife's shoulder. We're going to tell her the truth, he said. We're going to use this as a teaching moment. Not to make ourselves feel better, but because she deserves to grow up in a world where people acknowledge their mistakes and do better. The cabin had settled into an uneasy quiet as the plane climbed. People were on their phones, texting family, reading news coverage, posting their own takes on social media. The flight that was supposed to be routine had become historic, and everyone aboard knew they were now part of something bigger than themselves. Morrison's voice came over the intercom again. "We've reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. You're free to move about the cabin." And another pause, another steadying breath. "And I want you to know that I'm processing this experience too. I'm reading the articles about myself. I'm seeing what people are saying. And I'm committing to you all that when we land, I'm going to start the hard work of examining how I got here and how I change." Marcus closed his eyes, let himself feel the full weight of exhaustion that came with fighting battles you shouldn't have to fight. He thought about calling Angela, but he knew she was probably already fielding press calls and coordinating with their kids and holding down everything he couldn't manage right now. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter Maya. "Dad, are you okay? This is all over Twitter. Everyone's talking about it. I'm so proud of you and so angry this happened." He typed back, "I'm fine, sweetheart, and I'm using this, I promise." Jordan texted next, "Can I come to Dallas when you land? I want to be there." Marcus's throat tightened, his son wanting to stand beside him in this moment. "I'd like that," he wrote back. "I'd like that very much." The next 2 hours would be quiet, tense, full of passengers grappling with what they'd witnessed and their own roles in it. But Marcus knew that when they landed in Dallas, when the cabin doors opened and the cameras started rolling and the questions started flying, nothing would ever be the same again. For him. For this airline. For everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong in a space they'd earned the right to occupy. The flight attendant offered him a drink. "Water, please," Marcus said. "And thank you." She nodded, understanding that he was thanking her for more than just the water, for staying professional, for being kind, for doing her job correctly when her colleague had failed so spectacularly at doing hers. Marcus sipped the water and looked out the window at the clouds below, at the vast expanse of sky that for the next 2 hours belonged equally to everyone on this plane. Whatever their mistakes, whatever their biases, whatever came next right now, they were all just passengers flying toward an uncertain landing. And Marcus was determined to make sure that landing changed everything. 30 minutes into the flight, Marcus's private phone lit up with a call from Margaret Chen again. He answered quietly. "Marcus, we have a problem," Margaret said without preamble. "The Wall Street Journal just published internal company data from 5 years ago. Someone leaked diversity metrics showing that black passengers in first class were questioned about their tickets at 7 times the rate of white passengers, 7 times Marcus, and nobody flagged it. Nobody thought it was worth investigating." Marcus felt his stomach drop. How did they get that data? Anonymous source. But it's accurate. I pulled the original reports myself. Operations knew about the disparity and buried it under customer service consistency metrics. Margaret's voice was tight with anger. "We have documentation of 43 formal complaints about racial profiling in first class over a 3-year period. 43 people who took the time to fill out complaint forms, which means there were probably hundreds more who just suffered in silence." What happened to those complaints? Filed away. A few flight attendants got additional training. No systemic changes. No policy reforms. Business as usual. Margaret paused. "Marcus, this is bigger than one incident. The data proves it's a pattern. And now that the story is viral, every news outlet is digging into our practices. We're about to be exposed for systematic discrimination we've been ignoring for years." Marcus looked around the cabin. Passengers on their phones oblivious to the fact that the airline they'd trusted was about to be revealed as complicit in exactly what they'd just witnessed. "Release it," Marcus said quietly. "What?" "Release all of it. Every complaint, every metric, every buried report. Don't make them dig for it. Give it to them ourselves. Marcus, the board will lose their minds. The stock price will... The stock price is going to tank anyway when this comes out piecemeal over the next few weeks," Marcus interrupted. But if we release it ourselves, if we own it completely, we control the narrative. We show we're serious about transparency and change. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. You're asking me to commit corporate suicide. I'm asking you to do what's right. Finally. Marcus felt the weight of years pressing down on him. How long have you known about this data, Margaret? Another pause, longer this time. When Margaret spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. 2 years. It was in a quarterly operations report. I flagged it. Asked for a deeper analysis. Got pushback from the COO about creating negative PR. I pushed harder, got told to drop it because correlation doesn't equal causation, and we couldn't prove discriminatory intent. But you knew. I knew something was wrong, yes. And you let it go. I convinced myself that individual training would fix it, that we didn't need to expose the company to liability by acknowledging systemic issues. Margaret's voice cracked. I chose institutional protection over human dignity, and I'm realizing now that makes me complicit in every incident since then, including yours. Marcus closed his eyes. This was the truth that lived underneath everything: good people making compromises, protecting institutions, instead of individuals choosing comfort over courage. Not villains in some story, just ordinary people taking the path of least resistance while others suffered for it. Then help me fix it now, Marcus said. Release the data, all of it, today. The board meeting is in 3 hours. They're going to demand your resignation. Let them try. Marcus opened his eyes, looked at Patricia Donovan, still turned around in her seat, listening openly now. Margaret, how many board members do you think have ever experienced what I experienced today? None. They're all... Margaret stopped. White, Marcus finished. Wealthy, powerful. They've never had to prove they belong anywhere. This is abstract to them, numbers on a page, PR problems. But to millions of people, this is their lived reality. And if the board can't see that, then maybe they're the wrong people to lead this company forward. He heard Margaret typing furiously. I'm pulling the full data set now. Communications is going to have a heart attack when I tell them what we're doing. Good, Marcus said. We need people uncomfortable right now. Comfort is what got us here. He ended the call and found half the cabin staring at him. David Chen had his laptop open, was already reading the Wall Street Journal article that had just gone live. Mr. Williams, David said, his voice shaking. This article says Southwest had documented evidence of racial profiling for years. Years. And did nothing. I know. You knew? Patricia asked, her face pale. I just found out, but I'm not surprised. Marcus looked around at the passengers. This is what institutional racism looks like. It's not always burning crosses and slurs. Sometimes it's just data that gets filed away, complaints that get processed but don't lead to change. Policies that sound neutral but get applied differently based on who's being served. Sarah had pulled up the article on her phone, was reading through it with mounting horror. It says here that in 2019, a black physician flying first class to a medical conference was escorted off the plane after a flight attendant insisted her credentials were fake. The woman had to miss presenting her research on racial disparities in healthcare because someone decided she didn't look like a doctor. Denise Parker's voice came from the back. That was me. The cabin went dead silent. That was you, Sarah repeated. That was me. Denise walked forward into first class, her face set. Flight 3847, Chicago to Boston. I was presenting research on how implicit bias affects patient outcomes in emergency rooms. I had my medical license, my hospital ID, my conference credentials. None of it mattered. The flight attendant said black people forge documents all the time. She said it exactly like that. You people forge documents all the time. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, hot and sharp. What happened? I missed my presentation, lost out on a publication opportunity, spent 6 months filing complaints that went nowhere. Eventually got a form letter apology and a flight voucher. Denise's voice was remarkably steady. I used the voucher to book today's flight. Ironic, isn't it? Did they fire the flight attendant? Richard Donovan asked. 2 weeks paid leave for retraining, then back to work. Denise looked at Marcus. That's why I came forward when I heard what was happening today, because I knew it wasn't an isolated incident. I knew the pattern. I just didn't have proof. Now we have proof, Marcus said grimly. Years of it. David was scrolling through more articles that were publishing in real time. CNN is reporting that 3 other major airlines are now pulling their diversity metrics to preempt similar stories. United just issued a statement saying they're launching an internal review. Delta released their complaint data voluntarily. They had similar disparities but lower rates overall. Lower rates doesn't mean acceptable rates, Marcus said. This isn't a competition to see who profiles less. This is about why it's happening at all. Jessica had been standing in the galley listening to everything. Now she approached, her face streaked with dried tears. Mr. Williams, I need to tell you something. When I went through flight attendant training, they showed us videos on how to identify suspicious behavior. And every single example they showed, every single one, was a person of color, a Muslim man with a large bag, a black woman changing seats, a Latino teenager with a hoodie. They never said, watch out for brown people. But that's what we learned. That's what got coded into our threat assessment. Did anyone push back on that? Sarah asked, still recording. One person did. A black flight attendant in my class. She said the training felt racist. You know what the instructor told her? Jessica's voice was shaking. He said profiling is about patterns, not prejudice. He said if certain demographics show up more in security incidents, it's just statistics. He made her feel stupid for questioning it. What happened to her? Marcus asked. She quit during training. Said she couldn't work for a company that was teaching discrimination and calling it safety. Jessica looked at Marcus directly. Her name was Alicia Grant. And I just realized I learned to profile people from a training program, and when someone called it out, I watched her get silenced, and I said nothing. I let it happen. Morrison's voice came over the intercom again. Folks, I've been listening to the conversation in the cabin via the open channel, and I need to share something. I underwent similar training, and I enforced policies I should have questioned. I taught newer pilots to trust flight attendant judgment without examining what that judgment was based on. I participated in a system that hurt people, and I defended it because it was easier than confronting it. Patricia turned to her husband. Richard, remember when we flew to Martha's Vineyard last summer? There was that young black couple in first class, and I remember thinking they must be athletes or entertainers. I didn't think they could be doctors or lawyers or business owners. I just automatically assumed they were only there because of sports or music. I remember, Richard said quietly. And I thought the same thing. Why? Patricia pressed, asking herself as much as anyone. Why did our brains go there? What have we been taught that makes us see black excellence and immediately categorize it as exceptional rather than normal? Because that's how racism works, Denise said. It makes white normalcy invisible and black success suspect. You can't imagine us in first class as a matter of course, because you've been taught through media, through culture, through every message society sends that those spaces belong to white people and everyone else is a guest at best and intruder at worst. Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line, Board of Directors Emergency Session. Your immediate response required. He opened it. The email from the board chair, Richard Kemper, was terse. Marcus, the situation is escalating beyond control. We need you to issue a statement distancing yourself from the viral video and emphasizing that this was an isolated incident involving employees who will be terminated. The legal team recommends settlement with NDA. Call me immediately. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. They wanted him to spin this, to minimize it, to protect the institution at the expense of truth. He forwarded the email to Margaret with a single line. Tell them no. Tell them I'm releasing a statement in 1 hour and they're not going to like it. David looked up from his laptop, his face pale. Mr. Williams' Twitter is exploding. The hashtag has 15 million tweets now, but it's splitting into two camps. Half are supporting you. Half are calling this a publicity stunt. They're saying you manufactured the incident for attention, that you planned it. Of course they are, Marcus said wearily. That's always the defense. When you expose systemic injustice, people who benefit from the system will find any reason to discredit you. But some of the accusations are coming from black people too, David continued. They're saying you're using your privilege as a wealthy chairman to make this about you when thousands of everyday black people face worse without any recourse. They're saying you're centering yourself in a struggle that's bigger than you. Marcus felt that criticism land sharp and true. They're right. Sarah looked up from her phone. What? They're right, Marcus repeated. I am centering myself. I am using my privilege. The question is whether I'm using it to help or to perform. And I won't know the answer to that until this plays out. He stood up, addressed the cabin. I need to say something to all of you. What happened to me today happens to people every single day. The only reason it's news is because I have power and a platform. But Denise, he gestured to her, had the same thing happen and nobody cared. Thousands of people have had this happen, and their stories die in complaint forms that get filed away. So yes, I'm going to use this moment. I'm going to leverage every ounce of privilege and power I have, but not to make this about me, to make this about every person who couldn't fight back. His phone rang. Maya. He answered. Dad, there are reporters at the house. His daughter said, her voice tight with anxiety. They're asking Mom for comments. They're taking pictures through the windows. It's scary. Marcus's protective instincts flared. Put your mother on. Angela's voice came through calm but strained. Marcus, we're okay. Security is handling it. But you need to know they're digging into everything. Your college records, your first jobs. They found that arrest from when you were 19. Marcus felt his jaw clench. The arrest. He'd been a sophomore at Howard walking home from the library. A cop had stopped him, claimed he matched the description of a robbery suspect. When Marcus asked what description, the cop said, young black male. When Marcus protested, the cop arrested him for obstruction. The charges were dropped, but the arrest stayed on his record until he got it expunged 10 years later. Let them publish it, Marcus said. Let them show that this started for me before I had any power, that I've been living this my entire life. They're also calling your credibility into question, Angela continued, saying you have a history of playing the victim. They found that interview you did 5 years ago about being followed in a department store. I was followed in a department store. That happened. I know it did. But they're framing it as a pattern of you manufacturing incidents for sympathy. Angela's voice broke slightly. Marcus, I'm scared. I'm scared of what this is going to do to you, to our family, to our kids. I know, Marcus said softly. But Angela, if I don't do this, if I let them bury this like they've buried everything else, what am I teaching Maya and Jordan? That survival means staying quiet. That power should be used to protect yourself instead of helping others. I know, Angela whispered. I know you're right, but I'm still scared. Me too, Marcus admitted. But I'm more scared of doing nothing. He ended the call and found the entire cabin watching him again. The mask had slipped. They'd seen him not as a powerful chairman, but as a father worried about his family, a man dealing with consequences that extended far beyond this flight. Morrison's voice came through the intercom again, but this time it was shaking. Mr. Williams, I just got a call from my union rep. They're recommending I lawyer up. They said Southwest's legal team is building a case that I followed proper protocol and that any issues were the result of your non-compliance. They're going to argue that you escalated the situation deliberately. Marcus felt rage building again. They're going to make you the scapegoat. They're going to try, Morrison said. But I'm not going to let them. I'm releasing my own statement. I'm going to own what I did wrong and refuse to let them spin it. Derek, think about this. His voice cracked slightly, using his first name deliberately. If you go against the legal team's advice, you could lose everything. Your pension, your career, your protection. I've already lost those things, Morrison replied. I lost them the moment I made assumptions based on the color of your skin. At least now I get to choose whether I lose them while telling the truth or while perpetuating a lie. Jessica spoke up from where she was standing. I'm doing the same thing. My union rep told me to say nothing, but I'm not staying quiet. Not anymore. Sarah was typing furiously on her phone. This is incredible. You're all choosing truth over self-preservation. Do you know how rare that is? It shouldn't be rare, Patricia said quietly. It should be normal. Truth should be the default, not the exception. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Board is in chaos. Kemper is threatening to call for a vote of no confidence. 3 board members walked out in protest. Stock is down 4%. Legal is furious. Communications is overwhelmed. And I just told them all that we're releasing the full data set anyway. I may have just ended my career too. He texted back. Thank you for being brave. She responded, I should have been brave 2 years ago. I'm just finally doing what I should have done then. The captain's voice came through again. Folks, we're beginning our descent into Dallas. We should be on the ground in approximately 20 minutes. I want to prepare you. There will be media presence at the gate. A lot of it. You all have choices to make about how you want to engage. But I want you to know that whatever you decide, you've all been part of something significant today. Marcus looked out the window at the ground approaching. 20 minutes until landing. 20 minutes until everything changed irrevocably. David closed his laptop. Mr. Williams, I just posted my own statement. I included screenshots of my credentials as a diversity consultant and a full admission that I failed spectacularly at the one thing I'm supposed to be good at. I'm probably going to lose all my clients. But at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. What made you decide to do it? Marcus asked. My father. David's voice was thick. I keep thinking about everything he endured. The discrimination he faced coming here with nothing. The times he was treated as less than human. And I realized he survived all that, so I could have opportunities he never had. And I just used those opportunities to tell another person of color to accept discrimination quietly. I betrayed everything he sacrificed for. Richard Donovan raised his hand hesitantly. Mr. Williams, I want to do something too. I'm a retired judge. I have a blog about legal issues that gets decent traffic. I want to write about what happened today, about my own complicity, about the legal structures that enable this kind of discrimination. Would that be helpful? It would be more than helpful, Marcus said. It would be exactly what we need. People in positions of authority acknowledging how they've participated in these systems. Patricia pulled out her phone. I'm calling my granddaughter right now. I'm going to tell her what I did and what I learned. And I'm going to ask her to help me do better. She dialed, and everyone in the cabin listened as she spoke to her granddaughter with raw honesty. Sophia, baby, it's Grandma. I need to tell you about something that happened today. Something I'm ashamed of, but I want you to know about it because you deserve honesty, and I want to be better for you. Her voice cracked, but she kept going, kept being honest, kept choosing truth over comfort. Marcus felt something shifting in the cabin, a collective reckoning happening in real time. People who'd been passive observers of injustice, choosing to become active participants in change. Not because they were saints, but because they'd been confronted with the reality of their own complicity and couldn't look away anymore. The plane descended through clouds, and Marcus thought about all the flights he'd taken over his lifetime. All the times he'd been questioned, suspected, profiled. The time he was in his early 30s flying to close a major business deal when a flight attendant asked if he'd stolen the expensive watch he was wearing. The time at 40 after he'd made his first million when airport security insisted on searching every item in his bag while white passengers walked through untouched. The countless times he'd arrived at hotels and been directed to the service entrance because staff assumed he couldn't possibly be a guest. Each incident had been small, manageable, something he could swallow and move past. But they accumulated over time like sediment, building up layer by layer, until one day you looked down and realized you were standing on a mountain of indignities. "Mr. Williams," a voice came from the back of the cabin. A young white man, mid-20s, who hadn't spoken once during the entire flight. "I need to say something. I'm a law student, second year at SMU, and I've been sitting here for 2 hours thinking about every time I saw something like this and said nothing. Every time I heard racist jokes in my fraternity and laughed along. Every time I watched someone get profiled in a store and told myself it wasn't my problem." He stood up, walked forward into first class. His hands were shaking. "My name is Connor Walsh, and I've been complicit in racism my whole life by staying silent, by not wanting to make things awkward, by prioritizing my comfort over other people's dignity. And I'm realizing that makes me part of the problem, even though I've never personally discriminated against anyone." "What are you going to do about it?" Sarah asked, her phone still recording. "I don't know yet," Connor admitted. "But I know staying silent isn't an option anymore. I know that witnessing this and doing nothing would make me complicit in whatever happens next. So I'm starting by saying this on camera for the record. I saw racial profiling happen today. I watched it unfold. And I'm committing to never looking away again." The plane was low now, preparing for final approach. Marcus could see Dallas sprawling below them, could imagine the news crews gathering at the gate, the questions that would come rapid fire, the scrutiny that would intensify. His phone buzzed one more time. A message from Jordan. "Dad, I'm at the airport. Mom told me what's happening. I'm waiting at the gate with a sign that says, 'Proud of you, Dad.' Is that okay?" Marcus felt tears prick his eyes for the first time since this began. His son. His beautiful, brave son, who wanted to stand beside him publicly in this moment. He typed back with shaking fingers, "It's more than okay. It's everything. I love you." The wheels touched down, and the plane shuddered slightly as it made contact with the runway. They were on the ground. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Morrison's voice came through one last time. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dallas. The local time is 3:47 p.m. For your safety, please remain seated until the aircraft comes to a complete stop." And his voice caught. "And thank you. Thank you for bearing witness today, for having the courage to stay uncomfortable, for choosing truth when silence would have been easier. Whatever happens next, you were all part of something important. Don't forget that. Don't let anyone minimize it." The plane taxied toward the gate, and through the window, Marcus could see them, dozens of camera crews, reporters with microphones, crowds of people who'd gathered to witness this arrival. His phone was exploding with notifications, news alerts, text messages, emails. The board demanding answers, activists offering support, critics calling him divisive, supporters calling him brave. But all Marcus could think about was his son waiting at the gate with a sign, his daughter at home watching this unfold, his wife holding down everything he couldn't manage right now, the family he was doing this for, even as he risked everything they'd built. The plane came to a complete stop. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and for a moment, nobody moved. They all sat there processing, understanding that walking off this plane meant stepping into a new reality where none of them could claim ignorance anymore. "Mr. Williams," Jessica said quietly, standing at the front of the cabin. "Before we open the doors, I need to say thank you. I know that sounds absurd. Thanking you for letting me profile you, for putting you through this humiliation. But you gave me a choice between hiding and growing, between protecting my comfort and facing my complicity. Thank you for that choice, even though it's the hardest thing I've ever had to face." Morrison appeared from the cockpit. "I second that. You could have used your power to destroy us quietly. Instead, you gave us the opportunity to be part of the solution. That's a kind of grace I didn't expect, and probably don't deserve." "It's not about deserving," Marcus said, standing slowly. "It's about what kind of world we want to build. One where we punish people into silence, or one where we give them the space to grow. I don't know if that's the right choice. I won't know until I see what you both do with this opportunity. But I'm choosing to believe in redemption because the alternative is despair, and we can't afford despair right now." He looked around at every passenger. "Thank you all for staying, for listening, for processing, for making choices I know weren't easy. Some of you will face consequences for being on this flight, for being recorded, for your words or your silence being judged by millions. I'm sorry for that. But I hope you'll use those consequences the way I'm trying to use mine, as fuel for change, instead of reasons for regret." Sarah stopped recording. 7 hours of footage, she said. "The longest, most important documentation of my career. Mr. Williams, I'm going to edit this into a documentary. Not for profit. For education. Is that okay?" "It's more than okay. It's necessary." Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. For everyone getting off this plane, you have a choice about what you tell people. You can minimize what happened. Say it was overblown. That it wasn't that bad. That the media is making it bigger than it was. Or you can tell the truth. All of it. Uncomfortable and messy and complicated. The choice is yours. But know that every time you minimize injustice to make people comfortable, you're participating in the system that enables it." The flight attendant opened the cabin door, and the sound hit them immediately. Shouting questions, camera shutters clicking like locusts, the roar of a story that had grown far beyond any of them. Marcus stepped into the jetway, and the noise intensified. He could see Jordan now standing at the gate, with his sign, tears streaming down his face. Saw the reporters surging forward. Saw security trying to maintain control. Saw flashbulbs exploding like small supernovas. But before he faced any of it, he turned back to the passengers still filing off. "Remember this feeling," he said. "The discomfort, the uncertainty, the knowledge that silence and complicity led us here. Hold on to it. Because the moment we get comfortable again is the moment we start forgetting. And we can't afford to forget anymore." Then Marcus Williams walked off Flight 2847 and into the cameras and questions and chaos of a country that was finally painfully, unavoidably being forced to confront what it had been ignoring for far too long. Jordan reached Marcus first, pushing through the security cordon with the determination only a 19-year-old defending his father could muster. The sign he'd made, "Proud of you, Dad," written in thick black marker, was crumpling in his grip as he wrapped his arms around Marcus. "Dad, are you okay? Did they hurt you?" Jordan's voice was fierce, protective, and Marcus heard the echo of every conversation they'd ever had about staying safe, about surviving encounters with authority, about navigating a world that saw threat before it saw humanity. "I'm fine, son. I'm fine." Marcus held him tight, aware of the cameras capturing this moment, aware that even this embrace would be analyzed and dissected and turned into content. But he didn't care. His boy was here. "Mr. Williams! Mr. Williams!" The reporters surged forward, their questions overlapping into incomprehensible noise. "Did you plan this incident? Are you pressing charges? What do you say to people calling this a publicity stunt? Will the flight attendants be fired? Is this about getting Southwest to change policies, or is this personal revenge?" Marcus raised a hand, and somehow the crowd quieted enough for him to speak. "I'll make a statement in 20 minutes. Right now, I need to check on the other passengers from this flight." He turned back to the jetway, where Patricia and Richard Donovan were emerging, blinking in the camera flashes like people surfacing from underwater. Patricia's face was blotchy from crying, and when she saw the cameras, she faltered. "Mrs. Donovan," a reporter called out clearly, having done his homework fast. "You were seated in 1B. Did you witness the altercation? What did you see?" Patricia looked at Marcus, her eyes pleading for guidance. Marcus nodded once, a silent encouragement to tell her truth, whatever that was. Patricia's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, tried again. I said something terrible, on that plane, about Mr. Williams, and I need to own that before I say anything else. The reporter's energy shifted immediately, smelling blood. What did you say? I said you could just tell something was wrong when you looked at him. I made assumptions about a man I didn't know based on the color of his skin. Patricia's voice was getting stronger now, even as tears streamed down her face. I'm 72 years old, and I've been racist my whole life without calling it that. Comfortable racism, polite racism. The kind where you tell yourself you're a good person while making judgments that hurt other human beings. Richard put his arm around his wife. We both did. We sat there and watched discrimination happen, and we didn't say a word. We were complicit. The reporters were scribbling frantically, cameras swiveling between Patricia and Marcus. Mr. Williams, what's your response to that? My response is that Mrs. Donovan is doing something brave right now. She's telling the truth when lying would be easier. That's more than most people do. Jessica and Morrison emerged next, and the crowd erupted. There they are? That's the flight attendant. Captain Morrison, did you racially profile Marcus Williams? Morrison stopped at the threshold of the jetway, his face ashen. Security moved to form a barrier around him and Jessica, but Marcus stepped forward. Let them through. They have something to say. Jessica looked like she might be sick. Her hands were shaking so badly she clasped them together to hide it. I can't do this, she whispered to Morrison. There's too many of them. They're going to destroy us. We destroyed ourselves, Morrison said quietly. This is just the accounting. They walked forward together, and the questions came like artillery fire. Are you going to resign? Did you know who Marcus Williams was? How do you explain your actions? Were you trained to racially profile passengers? Morrison held up a hand, waited for relative quiet. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who'd aged years in hours. My name is Captain Derek Morrison. I've been flying for Southwest Airlines for 23 years. And today, I racially profiled the chairman of my own company because I made assumptions based on the color of his skin. The reporters exploded with follow-up questions, but Morrison kept talking, his voice rising over the din. I need to be clear about something. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was racism, plain and simple. I saw a black man in first class, and my brain defaulted to suspicion instead of respect. That's on me. That's not on training. That's not on policy. That's on the biases I've carried my whole life and never examined closely enough. Jessica stepped forward, her voice barely audible. I'm Jessica Martinez. I'm the flight attendant who initially confronted Mr. Williams. And everything Captain Morrison just said applies to me too. I profiled a passenger. I demanded proof from him that I never demanded from white passengers. I acted on bias and then defended it as professional judgment. Will you resign? A reporter called out. Jessica looked at Marcus. That's not my decision to make. Yes, it is, Marcus said clearly. You both have a choice. Resign and disappear into whatever comes next. Or stay and become part of the solution. Work with our new training programs. Tell your story to every employee at every airline that will listen. Use this moment of shame as a catalyst for real change. But understand, if you stay, you don't get to control the narrative. You don't get to soften what happened. You tell the whole truth over and over for as long as it takes. Morrison's jaw worked. And if we choose to resign, then you face whatever consequences come, and someone else becomes the face of this problem. Someone who might not have your willingness to be honest. Someone who might minimize it, spin it, turn it into another story about political correctness gone too far. Marcus looked at both of them. Did both. I'm not asking you to do this for me. I'm asking you to do it because there are thousands of Jessicas and Dereks out there right now making the same assumptions, causing the same harm. And maybe hearing your story, hearing how it feels to be so wrong so publicly, might reach them in ways data and policy never could. You're asking us to be martyrs, Jessica said. I'm asking you to be teachers. There's a difference. A reporter pushed forward. Mr. Williams, are you seriously suggesting that the people who discriminated against you should keep their jobs? Don't they deserve to be fired? Deserve. Marcus turned to face the cameras directly. Let me tell you about deserve. Jessica and Derek deserve consequences. They're getting them. Their names and faces are all over the news. They'll be recognized everywhere they go. They'll deal with the weight of public judgment for years. That's consequence enough. But firing them accomplishes what? It makes you all feel better. It gives you the satisfaction of punishment. And then what? They disappear, and the next Jessica and Derek do the same thing because we didn't actually fix the underlying problem. But they need to be held accountable, another reporter insisted. They are being held accountable. By staying. By doing the hard work of examining their biases publicly. By being vulnerable enough to say, I was wrong, over and over, until maybe finally it reaches people who need to hear it. Marcus's voice was rising now, fueled by days and weeks and years of having this same argument. We have a choice as a society. We can keep playing whack-a-mole with individual racists, firing them and feeling righteous about it while the system stays intact. Or we can use moments like this to actually change the system. Which one do you want? Sarah Chen emerged from the jetway, still filming. I want to add something. I'm Sarah Chen. I'm the passenger who recorded this incident. And I've spent the last 2 hours listening to people in that cabin grapple with their own complicity. I watched Patricia Donovan call her granddaughter and confess her racism with brutal honesty. I watched a diversity consultant admit he failed at the one thing he claims to be an expert in. I watched person after person choose discomfort over denial. That's what accountability looks like. Not just firing people and moving on, but creating space for genuine transformation. That's easy for you to say, a reporter challenged. You're not the one who was humiliated and profiled. No, I'm the one who's been watching it happen to people of color my entire life and doing nothing about it. Sarah shot back. I'm the one who convinced myself that as long as I wasn't actively racist, I was fine. That my silence was neutral. But there's no neutral in this. There's either active anti-racism or passive complicity. And I chose complicity until today, when I finally found the courage to press record. David Chen emerged next, walking directly to the cameras. My name is David Chen. I'm a diversity consultant, or I was. I've probably lost every client by now, because I was caught on video telling a black man being racially profiled to just comply with it, to make everyone else comfortable by accepting discrimination quietly. What were you thinking? A reporter asked. I was thinking about convenience, David said bluntly. About getting to my meeting on time. About avoiding conflict. I was thinking about everything except justice. And I'm saying this publicly because I know I'm not unique. How many of you watching this right now have done the same thing? Stayed quiet when you saw something wrong because getting involved seemed messy. Told yourself it wasn't your problem. Convinced yourself that you couldn't really know what was happening, so it was safer to stay out of it. Marcus's phone buzzed insistently. Margaret Chen calling. He stepped away from the crowd to answer. Marcus, the board vote happened. 5 members voted to request your resignation. 4 voted to support you. 3 abstained. Margaret's voice was tight. Kemper is calling a shareholder meeting. He's arguing that you've damaged the company's reputation irreparably and need to step down for the good of the organization. What's your recommendation? Fight him. Call his bluff. The shareholders might actually back you on this once they understand what we're really dealing with. Margaret paused. But Marcus, you need to know Southwest's stock is down 7%. Our competitors are gaining market share. We have 5 class action lawsuits filed already from passengers claiming they were also racially profiled. Legal is estimating settlements in the hundreds of millions. Good, Marcus said. Good. Those lawsuits represent people who've been suffering in silence. People who finally have evidence that they weren't imagining it. That it wasn't all in their heads. that they were right to feel violated and dismissed. So yes, good. Let them sue. Let them tell their stories. Let the cost of discrimination become visible instead of hidden. Marcus, the board is going to say you're intentionally sabotaging the company. The company sabotaged itself by building policies and culture that enabled this. I'm just refusing to help cover it up anymore. Marcus looked back at the crowd of reporters at Jessica and Morrison standing there being eviscerated by questions at Patricia Donovan still crying while confessing her biases. Margaret, I need you to do something for me. I need you to compile every complaint about racial profiling we've received in the last 10 years. Every single one. Names, dates, details. And I need you to reach out to each person and invite them to Dallas next week. We're holding a public forum. A public forum. Marcus Legal will have a stroke. Let them. We're done protecting the institution at the expense of individuals. Tell those complainants that Southwest Airlines is officially apologizing, and they're invited to share their stories publicly. We'll cover their travel, put them up in hotels, and we'll listen. Really listen. On camera. Let the whole country watch us reckon with what we've done. You're going to volunteer to be crucified. I'm going to volunteer to be honest. There's a difference. Marcus ended the call and returned to the press conference that had formed organically in the airport terminal. Morrison was fielding questions, his face drawn but resolute. No, I don't think I should keep my job if that means business as usual. But if Mr. Williams is willing to let me stay as part of real systemic change, then yes, I'm willing to do that work. Even though it means being a cautionary tale. Even though it means facing my own ugliness every single day. What about your family? A reporter asked. Your wife said she's not speaking to you. Morrison's face crumpled briefly before he regained control. My wife is right to be angry. She's been trying to tell me about my blind spots for years, and I dismissed her concerns as oversensitivity. I told her she was seeing problems that weren't there. And now the whole world is seeing what she saw all along, that I carry biases I refused to acknowledge. His voice broke. I hope she'll forgive me eventually, but I'll understand if she doesn't. Some things can't be unsaid. Some actions can't be undone. Jessica was surrounded by female reporters, asking about her perspective as a woman in the situation. Did you feel unsafe? Did Mr. Williams threaten you in any way? No, Jessica said firmly. Mr. Williams never threatened me. I felt uncomfortable because he was challenging my authority. But that discomfort came from being questioned, not from being threatened. And I need to be really clear about this. I played the victim. I acted like a black man calmly asking for fair treatment was aggressive. That's a tactic women sometimes use when we want to weaponize white femininity. And it's not okay. It puts black men at risk. It contributes to violence against them. I did that. I used my perceived vulnerability as a weapon. Are you saying you're a racist? A reporter asked. Jessica flinched but held her ground. I'm saying I acted in racist ways. I'm saying I have biases I didn't know were there. I'm saying that good intentions don't matter if they lead to discrimination. So yes, I suppose I am saying that. I'm racist. Not in the KKK way, not in the obvious way, but in the everyday normalized, just doing my job way that's maybe even more insidious because it's so easy to justify. Connor Walsh, the law student who'd spoken up on the plane, appeared beside Marcus. Mr. Williams, can I say something? Marcus nodded and Connor approached the cameras with visible trepidation. My name is Connor Walsh. I'm a second-year law student at SMU. I was on that flight, and I didn't do anything when I saw what was happening. I told myself it wasn't my place to get involved, that I didn't have all the facts, that speaking up would just make things worse. Every excuse white people always use to justify silence. What changed your mind? A reporter asked. Watching Mr. Williams stay calm when I would have lost my mind. Watching him offer grace to people who didn't deserve it. Watching him use this moment to teach instead of just punish. Connor looked directly at the camera. I'm speaking up now because I want other white people to understand our silence isn't neutral, it's a choice. We're choosing comfort over courage. We're choosing to protect a system that benefits us at the expense of people of color. And we need to stop pretending we don't know that's what we're doing. Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time it was Angela. Marcus, I need you to come home. Now. What's wrong? Are the kids okay? The kids are fine, but there's a crowd outside. Protesters. Some supporting you, some calling you a race baiter. It's getting tense. Police are here, but they're nervous about it escalating. I'm coming. Tell security to let me in through the back. He turned to Jordan. We need to get home. Your mother needs us. But before they could leave, Denise Parker approached with 3 other black passengers from the flight, 2 men and a woman who'd been in economy class. Mr. Williams, we'd like to stand with you when you make your official statement, if that's okay. You don't have to do that. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. We know, one of the men said. His name tag read Jerome Mitchell, U.S. Army veteran. I've been flying for 20 years since I got back from Iraq. You know how many times I've been pulled aside for extra screening, how many times I've had to prove I could afford my ticket, how many times I've watched white passengers sail through while I get questioned. Too many to count, the woman added. Her voice was strong, clear. I'm Alicia Grant. You might remember my name. I'm the flight attendant Jessica mentioned. The one who quit during training because I couldn't work for a company that taught racial profiling and called it safety protocol. Marcus felt something click into place. You came back. You heard what was happening, and you came back. I came back because Jessica remembered me, because she named me, because she admitted that watching me get silenced was part of how she learned to silence her own conscience. Alicia looked at Jessica, who was standing 20 feet away. I spent 15 years wondering if I'd made the right choice, if I'd been too sensitive, if I should have just kept my head down and built a career. And now I know I was right. My instincts were right. And I hope that wherever she is, every black woman who's been told she's overreacting hears this story and knows you're not overreacting. You're seeing clearly. Jessica pushed through the crowd. Alicia, I didn't know if you'd. I'm not here to forgive you, Alicia said clearly. I'm here to make sure people understand that this isn't new. This isn't one bad flight attendant having a bad day. This is policy. This is culture. This is what happens when companies prioritize comfort over justice. I understand, Jessica said quietly. And I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you'll let me try to do better. To be part of fixing what I helped break. That's not up to me. That's on you to prove. Alicia turned back to Marcus. Mr. Williams' people are going to try to make this about individual bad actors. They're going to say you're being too harsh or not harsh enough. They're going to try every possible angle to avoid the systemic questions. Don't let them. I won't, Marcus promised. A young black woman pushed through the crowd, couldn't have been more than 25, wearing a Southwest uniform. She was crying. Mr. Williams, I'm a flight attendant. I've been flying for 3 years, and I want you to know what Jessica described, that training she talked about, it's still happening. We still get trained to see brown people as threats. We still get taught that certain passengers are more likely to be problems. And when I push back, I get labeled as having a chip on my shoulder, as being too sensitive, as playing the race card. What's your name? Marcus asked gently. Tamara Johnson. Tamara, I want you to be part of what comes next. I want you to help redesign the training. Can you do that? Tamara looked shocked. I'm nobody. I'm just a flight attendant who's barely been there 3 years. You're exactly who we need. Someone who hasn't been worn down yet. Someone who still has the courage to say, this is wrong. Marcus looked around at the growing crowd, passengers from his flight. Other Southwest employees, protesters, reporters, curious bystanders. Anyone here who's experienced this, who's witnessed it, who wants to be part of fixing it, I want your contact information. I want your stories. I want your solutions. Because I don't have all the answers. Nobody does. But we have to try. A reporter pushed forward with a microphone. Mr. Williams, there's a counter-narrative gaining traction online. People are saying you planned this, that you deliberately didn't identify yourself so you could create a viral moment. What's your response? Marcus felt exhaustion pulling at him, but he forced himself to engage. My response is that I've been experiencing racism my entire life, long before I had any power or platform. And the fact that people would rather believe I manufactured this incident than accept that racial profiling is real and systemic, that tells you everything about why this keeps happening. It's easier to assume conspiracy than confront bias. But you admit you could have identified yourself immediately and avoided the whole situation. I could have. Just like I could have avoided every other incident in my life by being smaller, quieter, more accommodating. By proving constantly that I belong. By making white people comfortable at the expense of my own dignity. Marcus looked directly at the camera. I'm done doing that. I'm done making myself smaller so other people can stay comfortable. And if that makes me difficult or divisive, or whatever other word gets used to silence people who demand justice, then so be it. His phone rang again. Margaret. Marcus CNN is reporting that anonymous Southwest employees are coming forward with their own stories. We have 12 people in the last hour saying they've witnessed or experienced racial profiling in the last year alone. This is spiraling. It's not spiraling. It's truth emerging. Let it come. The board is demanding you stop speaking publicly until we have legal review everything. Tell the board I work for the shareholders, not for them. And I'm betting the shareholders would rather have a company that faces truth than one that hides from it. Marcus ended the call and addressed the crowd again. I'm going to make one more statement, and then I need to get home to my family. But I want everyone here to understand what we're really talking about. We're not just talking about one flight. We're talking about a system that's been harming people for decades while convincing itself it's being fair. We're talking about good people participating in oppression because it's easy and comfortable and the status quo. We're talking about the millions of small indignities that add up to inequality and our collective refusal to see them as connected to anything larger. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Jessica and Derek are going to face consequences for what they did, but they're also going to have opportunities that thousands of other people who've done the same thing don't get the opportunity to learn to grow to make amends. Some of you are going to say, that's not fair, that they should be punished more harshly, and I understand that impulse. But punishment without rehabilitation just perpetuates cycles of harm. So I'm choosing a different path. I'm choosing to believe people can change if we give them the tools and the accountability and the support. Patricia Donovan spoke up from where she was standing with her husband. Mr. Williams is giving us grace we don't deserve. All of us who were on that flight and stayed silent. All of us who made assumptions. All of us who've been complicit. He's offering us a chance to be better. And I think we owe it to him and to ourselves to take that chance seriously. A voice from the crowd called out, "What if they don't change? What if they go through this process and they're still racist?" "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Marcus said. "But I'd rather give people the chance to prove they can grow than assume they can't. Because if we give up on people's capacity for change, then we're really giving up on any hope of justice." Jordan tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Dad, Mom called again. She says it's urgent." Marcus nodded and addressed the crowd one final time. "I need to go check on my family, but I'll be making a full statement tomorrow at 10 a.m. here at the airport, and I invite anyone who's been affected by racial profiling in air travel to join me. Let's make sure all the stories get told, not just mine." As Marcus and Jordan pushed through the crowd toward the exit, reporters shouted final questions. "Will you resign? Are you pressing charges? What do you say to people calling you divisive?" Marcus didn't answer. He'd said what he needed to say. The rest would have to wait. In the car, Jordan broke the silence. "Dad, are you really going to let them keep their jobs? The flight attendant and the pilot. I'm really going to give them the choice to do better. Whether they take it is up to them." "But what if—" Jordan struggled with the question. What if being nice doesn't work? What if people see your mercy as weakness? Marcus looked at his son, his beautiful, idealistic son, who still believed in clear lines between right and wrong. Then I'll have tried something different than just punishment. And maybe that will matter to someone, or maybe it won't. But I'll know I chose transformation over retribution. And I can live with that. Even if it doesn't work. Even then. Because, son, we don't get to know if it'll work before we try. We just have to decide what kind of people we want to be. And I want to be someone who believes in second chances even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Jordan was quiet for a moment. I'm proud of you, Dad. Even when I'm scared for you, I'm proud. Marcus reached over and squeezed his son's hand, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, and everything that was still to come. The board fight, the lawsuits, the protests, the media scrutiny, the constant pressure to either be too forgiving or not forgiving enough. The impossible tightrope of being both victim and leader, both wounded and strong, both demanding justice and offering grace. It was too much for one person. But then it always had been. The weight that every person of color carried, the weight of representing more than yourself, of having every action scrutinized and judged and turned into a referendum on your entire race. The exhaustion of never being allowed to just be human, flawed and complicated, and sometimes wrong. But Marcus had chosen this path, had made himself visible in this moment, and now he had to see it through whatever came next. His phone buzzed with a text from Morrison. I'm staying. I'm doing the work. Thank you for giving me the chance. And one from Jessica. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to try. Thank you for believing I'm worth the chance. Marcus closed his eyes and let himself feel it, the hope and fear and uncertainty all mixed together. The future was unwritten. Change was not guaranteed. People would fail and stumble and sometimes give up entirely. But at least they'd have the chance to try. And that Marcus thought was worth fighting for. The protest crowd outside Marcus's house had grown to nearly 200 people by the time they arrived. Some held signs supporting him, justice for Marcus, end airline racism, we believe you. Others held signs condemning him, race baiter, fake victim, you're dividing America. Police had set up barriers down the middle of the street, keeping the two groups separated, but the shouting carried across the divide like competing storms. Angela met them at the back door, her face tight with controlled fear. They've been here for 3 hours. Someone threw a brick through Maya's bedroom window. She's okay, but she's terrified. This is too much, Marcus. This is too much for our family. Marcus pulled his wife close, feeling her trembling against him. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize for doing the right thing, Angela said, but her voice broke. Just tell me we're going to be okay. Tell me this is worth it. I don't know if we're going to be okay, but I know if I'd stayed silent, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Marcus looked at Jordan. Go check on your sister. Make sure she knows she's safe. After Jordan left, Angela pulled back to look at Marcus directly. The board called me. Kemper called me personally. He said if you resign quietly, they'll provide security for us. A generous severance package. Positive references. But if you fight them, they'll make our lives hell. They'll drag up every mistake you've ever made. They'll turn the shareholders against you. They'll... Let them, Marcus said quietly. Angela, I've spent my whole career playing their game. Being the acceptable black executive. Not too threatening. Not too angry. Always measured. Always careful. And where did it get us? To a place where my own airline was systematically discriminating against people who looked like me, and I didn't even know because I was too busy trying to fit in. I'm not asking you to quit. I'm asking you to think about Maya and Jordan, about what this is doing to them. I am thinking about them. What kind of father would I be if I taught them that survival means accepting injustice quietly, that power should be used to protect yourself instead of changing systems? Marcus took Angela's hands. But you're right that this decision affects all of us. So I'm asking, not telling, do you want me to step back? Because if you do, I will. Your well-being and the kids' safety matter more than any of this. Angela was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. You know what Maya said when she saw the brick in her room? She said, Dad's doing something important. That's why they're scared. She's 16 years old and she gets it. She understands that real change comes with real cost. That doesn't mean she should have to pay that cost. We're all paying it, Marcus. We've been paying it their whole lives. Every time you got pulled over for driving while black and came home angry, but had to hide it so they wouldn't worry. Every time I had to coach them on how to act around police so they'd be safe. Every time we had to explain why someone assumed they didn't belong somewhere. We've been paying the cost of racism all along. At least now we get to fight back. Marcus felt something break open in his chest. Gratitude and grief and determination all mixing together. I love you. God, I love you. I know. Now go talk to our daughter, and then get back out there and finish what you started. Maya was in Jordan's room sitting on his bed with her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked so young, so vulnerable, and Marcus felt rage at everyone who'd made his baby girl feel unsafe in her own home. Hey, sweetheart, Marcus said softly from the doorway. I'm okay, Dad. The brick didn't hit me. Jordan's being dramatic. I'm not being dramatic, Jordan protested. It came through your window while you were sitting at your desk. But it didn't hit me. Maya looked at Marcus with eyes that were trying to be brave but couldn't quite hide the fear. Dad, are you going to quit because of what happened? Do you want me to? Maya considered this seriously. I want you to be safe. I want all of us to be safe. But I also... She paused, searching for words. I also want to live in a world where what happened to you doesn't keep happening. Where I don't have to worry every time I fly that someone's going to assume I don't belong. Where Jordan doesn't have to be scared of getting pulled over. Where we get to just exist without constantly proving we're not threats. That's a heavy thing for a 16-year-old to carry, Marcus said. I'm black in America, Dad. I've been carrying heavy things my whole life. At least now I get to see someone fight back. She smiled slightly. Even if that someone is my embarrassing dad who's all over the news. Marcus laughed despite everything. Embarrassing. So embarrassing. My group chat has been blowing up all day. Half my friends think you're a hero. The other half think you're making too big a deal out of nothing. And I've had to explain to approximately 12 white girls why, but Jessica didn't mean it, isn't a defense. What did you tell them? I told them, intent doesn't matter when the impact is harm. That's what you always taught me. Maya's voice got quieter. But Dad, some of them stopped talking to me after that. Girls I've been friends with since elementary school. They said I was being divisive, that I was choosing race over friendship. Marcus felt that familiar pain watching his child experience the same losses he'd experienced, the same awakening to who your real friends were when justice became personal. I'm sorry, baby. That's not fair. Life's not fair, Maya said, echoing words Marcus had told her 100 times. But we still have to try to make it better. So yeah, keep fighting. We'll be okay. 6 months later, Marcus stood in a conference room at Southwest headquarters with Jessica Martinez, Derek Morrison, and 38 people who'd filed complaints about racial profiling on Southwest flights over the past decade. The room was full of pain and anger and hope, all tangled together. Thank you all for coming, Marcus began. I know this isn't easy, reliving these experiences, trusting the company that failed you to do better. But I want you to know everything you share today is going into a new training protocol that will be mandatory for every Southwest employee. And not just Southwest. 3 other major airlines have already committed to adopting what we're calling the Morrison-Martinez Protocol. Denise Parker, the trauma surgeon from the original flight, stood up. Before we start, I need to say something. Some people have asked me why I'm participating in this. Why I'm giving Southwest another chance after they failed me so badly. And the truth is, I'm not doing this for Southwest. I'm doing this for every black doctor, lawyer, executive, teacher, parent, student who's going to fly in the future. I'm doing this because silence hasn't worked. Complaints haven't worked. But maybe education combined with accountability might work. Jessica stood next, her hands shaking slightly. I'm Jessica Martinez. 6 months ago, I racially profiled Mr. Williams on Flight 2847. And since then, I've been learning what that really means. Not just the incident itself, but the decades of bias that led to that moment. I've spent these 6 months listening to stories like yours, reading research on implicit bias, attending workshops on anti-racism. And I want you to know, her voice cracked, I want you to know that I hear you. I believe you, and I'm committed to making sure no other flight attendant follows the path I took. An older black man raised his hand. I'm Howard Chen. My complaint was from 2018. I was flying to my mother's funeral, first class, because I wanted one moment of comfort in the worst week of my life. The flight attendant accused me of stealing my seatmate's wallet in front of everyone. Security searched me, found nothing obviously. Made me miss my connection. I arrived at my mother's funeral 3 hours late, humiliated and angry. He looked at Jessica. Your training, is it going to stop that from happening to someone else? I hope so, Jessica said. But I can't promise. What I can promise is that when it does happen, because bias is deep and change is slow, there will be clear protocols for accountability. There will be reporting mechanisms that actually get investigated. There will be consequences that matter. Morrison stepped forward. I'm Captain Derek Morrison. I was Mr. Chen's captain on that 2018 flight. I backed my flight attendant's decision. I assumed she was right because she was my crew. I never questioned whether her judgment might be compromised by bias. That was a failure of leadership. My failure. He looked around the room. I've spent the last 6 months doing what Mr. Williams asked, telling my story to every group that will listen. Airlines, schools, police departments, corporate training sessions. And the thing I've learned is that almost everyone thinks they're not racist. We all think bias is something other people have. But when I tell the story of profiling the chairman of my own airline, people start to see if I could do that, anyone could. If I could make those assumptions, those judgments, despite all my training and experience, then bias is more pervasive than we want to admit. A young black woman stood. I'm Keisha Williams, no relation to Mr. Williams. I filed a complaint last year after a flight attendant followed me to the bathroom because she thought I was trying to sneak into first class from economy. I wasn't. I just needed to use the restroom, but she watched me the entire time, made me feel like a criminal for having a basic bodily function. She looked at Jessica. How is your training going to address that? The constant surveillance. The assumption that we're always doing something wrong. Jessica took a deep breath. The training includes specific modules on surveillance bias, on how we unconsciously monitor certain passengers more closely, on how that surveillance creates hostile environments even when no explicit discrimination occurs. And we're implementing new policies. Flight attendants have to document why they're questioning or monitoring any passenger. Those documentations get reviewed monthly for patterns. If someone is consistently flagging passengers of one race, they get retrained or reassigned. What about passengers who complain about sitting next to black people? Another person asked. I've been on flights where white passengers demanded seat changes because they were uncomfortable sitting next to me, and the flight attendants accommodated them. Morrison answered this one. New policy: if a passenger requests a seat change for any reason that suggests racial bias, we note it in their passenger record. 3 flagged incidents, and they're banned from Southwest. We're done prioritizing racist passengers' comfort over other passengers' dignity. But how will you prove it's racial? Someone asked. People won't say, I don't want to sit next to a black person. They'll say they're uncomfortable, or they need more space, or some other excuse. That's where training comes in, Marcus interjected. We're teaching our staff to recognize coded language, to understand the difference between legitimate complaints and bias masquerading as preference. It won't catch everything, but it's a start. Sarah Chen walked to the front of the room. Over the past 6 months, she'd become an unexpected ally, using her platform as a journalism professor to keep the story alive in media coverage. I want to share something. I've been documenting this process for a film, and what I've found is that the most powerful moments aren't the big policy changes. They're the small human moments. Like watching Jessica cry while reading complaints from passengers she never met, but whose experiences mirror what she did to Mr. Williams. Like watching Morrison call his estranged wife and beg her to do the anti-racism training with him because he can't do it alone. Like watching board members who initially wanted to fire everyone now advocating for transformative justice instead of punitive measures. She looked around the room. The film comes out next month. It's called Seat 2A, The Flight That Changed Everything, and it's already been selected for Sundance. But more importantly, it's being made available for free to any organization that wants to use it for training. Because this story doesn't belong to Southwest. It belongs to everyone who's ever been profiled. Everyone who's ever had to prove they belong. Everyone who's ever been treated as suspicious for existing. Patricia Donovan stood up from where she'd been sitting quietly. I'd like to say something if that's okay. I'm Patricia Donovan. I was passenger 1B on that flight. I made racist comments about Mr. Williams. And for the past 6 months, I've been on my own journey of reckoning with 72 years of unexamined bias. She looked around the room at all the black and brown faces. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know what I've been doing. I started a monthly discussion group in my retirement community, 23 white women, ages 65 to 87, all reading books about racism and talking about our complicity. It's uncomfortable. Some women have quit. Some have gotten angry and defensive. But some are really trying to understand. Really trying to change. Why should we care about white women's book clubs? Someone asked, not hostile, but genuinely questioning. Because we're the ones who call the police on black people for barbecuing in parks, Patricia said bluntly. We're the ones who clutch our purses when black men enter elevators. We're the ones who ask urban neighbors if they live in the building. We're the ones whose discomfort gets weaponized into danger for people of color. So if we can learn to check our biases, to question our discomfort, to stop seeing threat where there's none that matters. It doesn't fix everything. But it matters. Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. Board meeting in 30 minutes. Kemper's making his move. This is it. He stood. I need to step out for a few minutes, but please keep sharing. Jessica and Derek are recording everything with your permission. Your stories are going to change how this industry operates. In the boardroom, Richard Kemper was already holding court. 5 board members flanked him, looking uncomfortable but committed. Marcus recognized the dynamic immediately, people who'd made a decision and were now doubling down to avoid admitting they were wrong. Marcus, thank you for joining us, Kemper said with false civility. We've been discussing the company's direction. The stock is down 12% since your incident. We've lost market share to Delta and United. Legal fees are mounting. And your publicity campaign... It's not a publicity campaign, Marcus interrupted. It's accountability. It's costing us money, Kemper shot back. Millions in settlements, hundreds of thousands in training programs that may not even work. And for what? To make you feel better about being inconvenienced on a flight. Marcus felt the familiar rage building, but kept his voice level. Inconvenienced? Is that what you think happened? I was racially profiled on my own airline. And when we investigated, we found evidence of systematic discrimination spanning years. That's not inconvenience. That's institutional racism. That's a very charged term, one of the other board members said nervously. Perhaps we should use language that's less divisive. I'm not interested in comfortable language, Marcus said. I'm interested in honest language. We discriminated against black passengers at higher rates than white passengers. That's documented. That's provable. That's racism. Call it what it is. Kemper leaned forward. Marcus, we brought you onto this board because you were a bridge builder, someone who could appeal to diverse constituencies without alienating traditional customers. But you've become polarizing, divisive, You're turning this into a racial crusade instead of running an airline. I'm doing both, and the numbers prove it. Marcus pulled up a presentation on the screen. Our complaints about racial profiling are down 43% in the 6 months since implementation of new protocols. Customer satisfaction among black passengers is up 28%. And here's the interesting part. Overall satisfaction is up 12%, because when you create systems that treat everyone with dignity, everyone benefits. Cherry-picking data. Kemper dismissed. The stock price tells the real story. The stock price reflects investor anxiety about change. Give it time. Early data from our customer surveys shows that 67% of passengers support our new policies. 31% are opposed or neutral. 2% said they'll never fly Southwest again because of our woke policies. I'm willing to lose a 2% of racists to gain the trust of millions who've been systematically mistreated. Another board member spoke up, Ellen Vasquez, who'd been one of Marcus's early supporters. Marcus, I support what you're doing. But the question is whether you're the right person to lead it. You've become the story instead of the company. Every article is about you, not about Southwest's transformation. Would the changes be more effective if someone else was the face of them? Marcus felt the truth of that land. He'd been thinking the same thing for weeks, but hadn't wanted to admit it. You might be right, he said quietly. The story has become about me instead of about the thousands of people who've been harmed, instead of about the systemic changes we're implementing. So here's what I'm proposing. I'll step down as chairman. But not because I've done anything wrong, because the work has grown bigger than any one person. I'll transition to an advisory role, help with training, consult on policy. But let someone else lead the board, someone who can focus on the work instead of managing my own story. The room went silent. Kemper looked thrown. He'd been prepared for a fight, not a strategic retreat. Who would you recommend? Ellen asked. Alicia Grant, Marcus said. The flight attendant who quit during training because she recognized the bias in our protocols. She spent 15 years working in airline safety consulting. She knows the industry inside and out, and she has credibility with the communities we've harmed. Make her the first black woman to chair Southwest's board. She has no board experience? Kemper protested. Neither did I when I started. Neither did most of you. Board experience is code for people we're comfortable with. I'm proposing someone who'll make us uncomfortable in productive ways. Margaret spoke up from where she'd been sitting quietly. I support Marcus's proposal. Alicia has been invaluable in developing the new protocols. She's respected by employees and advocates alike. And frankly, if we're serious about transformation, we need leadership that reflects that commitment. The vote happened 30 minutes later. 7 in favor of Marcus stepping down as chair and appointing Alicia. 3 opposed. 2 abstained. Kemper voted yes, seeing it as a victory, even though he'd lost the larger war. Marcus walked out of that boardroom feeling lighter than he had in months. He'd lost the title, but kept the mission. And maybe that was what mattered. That evening, Marcus gathered his family in the living room. Maya and Jordan sat on the couch, Angela beside them. He told them about the board vote, about stepping down, about what came next. So you're quitting? Jordan asked, confused. I'm transitioning, stepping aside so others can lead. The work isn't done, it's just beginning. But I don't need to be the face of it anymore. Are you giving up? Maya asked, and Marcus heard the worry in her voice. No, baby. I'm letting go. There's a difference. Giving up means stopping. Letting go means trusting others to carry it forward. He looked at both his kids. You know what I learned these past 6 months? Real change doesn't come from heroes. It comes from hundreds of people doing small things consistently. I was never supposed to be the hero of this story. I was just supposed to be the spark that helped other people find their own courage. That's beautiful, Dad, Maya said. Also really corny, but beautiful. Marcus laughed. When did you get so sarcastic? I learned from the best. She smiled. So what happens now? Now I spend more time at home, more time with you two. I keep working on the training programs, but from behind the scenes. I let Jessica and Derek and Alicia and all the others become the faces of this movement. And I trust that the work will continue without me at the center of it. What if it doesn't? Jordan asked. What if you step back and everything falls apart? Then I'll know I didn't build something sustainable. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think we've created something real here, something that has roots. 3 months later, Sarah's documentary premiered at Sundance to standing ovations and immediate distribution deals. But more importantly, it became required viewing at 43 airlines worldwide. The Morrison-Martinez Protocol was adopted by 6 major carriers and adapted by dozens more. Jessica and Derek became unlikely activists, traveling to conferences and corporations, telling their story with brutal honesty. Not asking for forgiveness, but offering roadmaps for transformation. Patricia Donovan's book club expanded to 12 other retirement communities, creating networks of older white people confronting their biases. David Chen rebuilt his consulting practice around a new model, not just training, but ongoing accountability partnerships, where companies committed to regular audits and public reporting of their diversity metrics. And the complaints kept coming. Not complaints about Southwest, but complaints from passengers at other airlines who'd experienced the same profiling and now had language for it, evidence that they weren't imagining things. Courage to speak up because they'd seen others be believed. 1 year after Flight 2847, Marcus stood in the back of a conference room watching Alicia Grant present Southwest's annual diversity report to shareholders. The numbers told a story: complaints down 68%, satisfaction up across all demographic groups, employee turnover among staff of color down by half. But the real story was in the faces. Flight attendants who felt empowered to call out bias in their colleagues. Passengers who felt safe to report discrimination without fear of being dismissed. Families who flew without the constant low-level anxiety that came from wondering if this would be the flight where they were questioned, suspected, profiled. Denise Parker found Marcus after the presentation. "You did good work here." "We did good work, all of us." "True, but you started it. You had the power to fight back and you used it. That matters." She paused. "I got my promotion, Chief of Surgery. And last week, I flew first class to a conference in Boston, the same route where I got profiled 5 years ago. And you know what happened?" "What?" "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I sat down, the flight attendant smiled, and offered me a drink, and I flew to Boston without incident." That's the world you helped create, one where nothing happening is actually everything. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. That's all I wanted. For nothing to happen. For people to just exist without constantly proving they deserve to. Sarah approached with her camera crew. "Mr. Williams, can I get a quick interview follow-up footage for the extended version?" "Actually interview Alicia. Interview Jessica and Derek. Interview the passengers whose lives changed because they finally felt heard. I've said enough." "But you're the story," Sarah protested. "No, I was never the story. The story is what happens when systems change, when accountability meets grace, when people choose truth over comfort. I was just the catalyst. The story is everyone else." That night, Marcus sat in his backyard with Angela, watching the sunset and drinking sweet tea. They didn't talk much. They'd already said everything that needed saying. But Angela reached over and took his hand. "You know what Maya told me today?" Angela said. "She told me that 3 of her white friends, the ones who stopped talking to her, reached out to apologize. They said they'd been watching your story unfold, and it made them realize they'd chosen comfort over friendship. They want to learn, to do better." That's good. That's really good. Jordan got a letter from his college. They want him to speak at orientation about being the son of an activist, about living with the weight of public scrutiny, about what it means to fight for justice as a family. Marcus smiled. What did he say? He said yes. Said if his dad could face down an entire airline industry, he could handle a room full of freshmen. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. Somewhere in America, a black passenger was boarding a plane without fear. Somewhere, a flight attendant was questioning her assumptions before acting on them. Somewhere, a white person was sitting with their discomfort instead of weaponizing it. Somewhere, a system that had been broken for decades was healing one policy change, one conversation, one moment of accountability at a time. Marcus's phone buzzed with a news alert. Morrison-Martinez Protocol, credited with 47% reduction in airline discrimination complaints nationwide. He showed it to Angela, and she smiled. "You changed the world, Marcus Williams." "We changed a small part of it," Marcus corrected. "There's still so much work to do, so many systems to fix, so many people still suffering under the weight of bias and discrimination. But today, right now, this moment, take the win." So Marcus did. He sat there in his backyard with his wife's hand in his children safe inside their home, and let himself feel the weight lifting. Not the weight of racism that would never fully lift, not in his lifetime, maybe not in his children's, but the weight of silence, the weight of complicity, the weight of knowing something was wrong and feeling powerless to change it. He'd found his power, and more importantly, he'd used it to help others find theirs. That was enough. It had to be enough. Because the fight would continue tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. But tonight, Marcus Williams, son, husband, father, chairman, and catalyst for change, would rest and dream of a world where someday a black man could sit in seat 2A without anyone questioning whether he belonged there, where his children and grandchildren could move through the world with the same ease and assumption of belonging that white people took for granted, where justice wasn't something you had to fight for, but something that simply was. That world didn't exist yet, but it was closer than it had been a year ago. And that was worth every painful, terrifying, exhausting moment of the past 12 months. Marcus closed his eyes and let the evening breeze wash over him, carrying with it the sounds of his neighborhood children playing dogs, barking neighbors calling to each other over fences. The ordinary sounds of life continuing. The beautiful, mundane reality of a world that had shifted just slightly toward justice. In the house, Maya's music played softly. Jordan laughed at something on his phone. Angela hummed quietly beside him. And Marcus thought about all the people he'd never meet whose lives were different because of what started on Flight 2847. The passengers who'd fly without fear. The employees who'd work without having to compromise their integrity. The families who'd tell different stories about what was possible. One flight. One moment. One man refusing to make himself smaller. And from that, a movement. A transformation. A future that looked different than the past. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. He thought about his grandmother who'd cleaned houses in Montgomery. His father who'd worked 2 jobs to send him to college. His mother who'd taught him that dignity wasn't something anyone could take from you. It was something you carried within yourself. They'd paved this path. He'd just walked it far enough to make it visible to others. "Thank you," he whispered to the night, to his ancestors, to everyone who'd suffered in silence, so he could speak, to everyone who'd fought before him, so he could stand. And then Marcus Williams went inside to have dinner with his family, to laugh at Jordan's stories, and hear about Maya's day, to live the ordinary, extraordinary life that his fight had been about all along, the right to exist fully and freely without apology or explanation in whatever space his feet carried him. The right to belong. Simply. Completely. Finally. That was the flight that changed everything.